Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training, we're going to be going over nutrition, how much to burn. Now, if you remember, what we are doing right now is we are continuing our theme of the science of transformation. And what we are doing inside of this training is we're looking at the first how question of nutrition, right? And so if you remember, what we are doing is we are going over the 4 pillars of health: nutrition, movement, sleep, and recharge. And we are evaluating and looking at each of the 6 W's within those 4 pillars. And right now we are on the how question of nutrition. Now, remember, what we're doing in this entire module is really laying down the foundations for you to be able to have your own personal transformation, as well as laying the foundations for you to become a successful remote wellness practitioner, so that way you can coach your own students through this transformation. Now, it's always important to remember also that as you are learning this information, you will be turning around and coaching others through it as well. So as always, it's very important that you do pay attention, and that way you keep showing up to the classroom, because so far inside of this module, you've really been doing a phenomenal job of getting through these trainings. So keep on doing exactly the same thing, okay? Now, over these first few months, as you are getting your certification inside of this program, what it's going to do is it's going to really completely transform your entire understanding of health. And that's really going to allow you to become and transform into that remote wellness practitioner for your career, okay? Now, real quick, as we dive into this training, I do want to go ahead and talk about the 3 how questions of nutrition, because there are 3 major how questions when it comes to understanding nutrition. The first question is how much to burn. The second one is how much to eat. And the third one is how to eat. And so all of these 3 are actually equally important and absolutely critical. And if you do not understand the content inside of these 3 trainings, then really, ultimately, you will be unable to undergo a transformation for yourself and really be unable to help other students go through their own health transformation as well. So that's why these 3 questions are very important for you to understand. Okay, now, typically, some students at this point get confused, and they might ask the question and say, hey coach, is this going to be how I speak to my students about all of these topics? Because this is a lot, like I'm overwhelmed, right? What's going on here? And I want to go ahead and clearly answer this right now. No, absolutely not, okay? Because the transformation track that you are going through inside of this program is going to be different than what your students are going to go through, because obviously they're not getting their certification in remote wellness, right? And so you will learn more about how you are going to walk your students through their transformation in an upcoming module, specifically module number 5. And so right now, what you are learning is you are learning all of the foundational knowledge that is going to be required for you to get your own certification. And so unless your students decide that they also want to get a certification in remote wellness, they are going to have a more simpler and distilled version of this. So don't worry, we're going to be getting to that, and it's going to become very clear once we get to that point where we talk about how you're going to explain all of this to your students. Now, last couple points that I do want to mention before we get into this training as well is that I do want to go ahead and remind you and emphasize to you that this program is going to change your life. What we are talking about inside of this module is the foundational, bare minimum understanding of the health basics in order to understand how your body works. And so other than becoming a remote wellness practitioner and helping others with this, this is critical for you to be able to know for yourself, okay? Because what you are learning inside of these trainings and inside of this module is not explained this way in any other school, in any other college, university, institute, degree, or certification. How do I know? Because I've literally spent well over $200,000 of my own money at this point. No loans, no financing, no any of that, okay? On my own self-education in the last decade, okay? And I've literally looked over and gone through pretty much most, if not all, of the certifications and or degree programs that are out there, okay? And why does nobody else explain the concepts in the way that we are going to talk about inside of this training and inside of this module? Because of the fact that they have not tested their theories, right? All of the book theories that they have in the real world with real students. What you are learning inside of this training is refined from actually helping people transform their lives. We have literally been doing this practically over 10 years and refining our understanding of these concepts in order to make them applicable, okay? And so this knowledge that you are learning inside of this module will absolutely transform your life and will absolutely transform your health as soon as your eyes are open to it, okay? So strap in, it's only going to get better and better from here, okay? And so what all of this means is that this is the path. This is the path to be able to have a secure 6+ figure income online, completely remote. This is the path to having financial freedom and, more importantly, having financial security, because you might have financial freedom, but you don't have security around those finances, and being able to travel and live your life the way that you want, okay? So by having this skill set, you are automatically going to become valuable to every single human being on the planet. Valuable meaning valuable, your ability to provide value. You can literally move to like Thailand tomorrow, and guess what? They would still need this transformation also. And so literally every ethnicity, every age, every gender, it does not matter who it is. Once you go through this certification process, you can help everyone with this transformational understanding of the mind and body that you are going to have. Okay, so remember, this is not get rich quick. This is get rich for sure. Now, does that mean that some of these trainings are going to be longer? Yes, that's exactly what it means. Period, right? Why? Because what we're talking about inside of these modules are topics that are actually critical and important to understand when it comes to your health. There's literally no way for me to be able to condense this knowledge down to a 5-second TikTok or an Instagram story, okay? This is the reason why today's world has such a small attention span, because so many people cannot focus on deeper topics, okay? And so because we are jam-packing each of these trainings, some of them are going to be more longer than normal, okay? And so if you do need to pause, if you do need to take a break, if you need to divide this training up into 15 or 30-minute increments for yourself, don't worry. You can do that, okay? Over time, as you learn to be able to focus longer and longer, it's like a muscle. The more you practice it, the better you're going to get, okay? So just remember, you do not need to go through these trainings all in one sitting, okay? And so I don't need you to remind me or tell me that these trainings are long, okay? I know they are long, okay? But I just ask that you pinky promise me that you are going to take a breath and not get overwhelmed, and do take a break if you need it, okay? Cool? Deal? Awesome. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the meat and potatoes. Let's go ahead and hop into the actual training. And the first thing that we are going to talk about is the next hot fad billion-dollar diet. What do we mean by this, okay? What we mean by this is that these days there's a new diet that's pretty much introduced daily, and a new fad diet that goes around every single few months, okay? And for most who are hopping on these fad diets every few months, what their goal is they're really just trying to lose weight and be healthier. And these people typically fall into two camps, right? The first camp might be, hey, you know what? They've been struggling with their weight, right? They want to lose a couple pounds here and there. That's the first camp. And then the second camp of people are the people who, over the years, over the yearly holidays, over the time that has happened, they've stacked on 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, 200 pounds over the last XYZ number of years, right? But regardless, for both of these people, their end goal is always the same, even though they're hopping on that next hot diet. Really, ultimately, what they want is they just want to lose weight and get healthier. That's it. That's ultimately what they're looking for, right? And yet, every single one of these new hot fad diets, what it does is it says something completely different from the previous one, right? Whether that be the keto diet, whether that be intermittent fasting, whether that be paleo, low fat, Weight Watchers, sugar-free, Whole30, juice diet, raw diet, rabbit diet, water diet, air diet, dance in the rain diet. It does not matter what diet it is. It seems like every single diet that is coming out that's a new hot fad diet is saying something completely different. And many times, a lot of these new hot diets even contradict each other, right? For example, Whole30 will say, hey, eat whole foods, carbs are okay. While the keto diet will say, hey, no, don't eat carbs. Carbs are the enemy, right? And so what it does is it causes absolute confusion for most of the population, especially the air diet, which says eat and drink only air, right? And so the next hot fad diet that whatever some crazy marketing machine is able to come up with is just causing absolute confusion for most of the population. And they just end up moving from one diet to the next every few months thinking, okay, you know what? That last one didn't work, but you know what? This one's new. This one's different. This one says the exact opposite of what the previous one said. And so this one has to work, right? And we've already learned from a previous training what the success rate on these diets as a whole are, right? We already talked about how 95% is the failure rate for diets, right? And the reason for this being is because of the fact that there are massive billion-dollar companies that are out there that purely make all of their profits from fat loss and diets in order to sell more of their supplements, more of their equipment, more of their prescriptions, and more of their workouts, right? And so what I want to go ahead and emphasize to you is that this training, the training that you are in right now, is going to change all of it. For you, for the people around you, for your students, it's going to completely transform everything for you. Because inside of this training, we are going to learn the principles of how all diets work. It does not matter what diet it is. We're going to talk about the principles behind how they work, okay? And when your eyes are open to this, you will be absolutely shocked at how simple it is. And that is the beautiful thing about being a Remote Wellness Academy student, is because when you are becoming a remote wellness practitioner, you are learning the foundational principles. That means that you get to focus on the macro 30,000 foot view and get to the bottom of what the truth actually is, so that way you, your students, and everyone around you will never ever be confused by this billion-dollar marketing machine ever again. So ladies and gentlemen, strap in. This is about to get really, really, really fun. So let's go ahead and talk about that right now. How is it that all diets work? What is the principles behind what makes all diets work? Now, if you remember, in a previous training, we spoke about what is food, right? Do you remember what we said that food was, right? We said that food is really just energy, right? That's what we talked about in a previous training. And in order to prove that food is really just energy, what we did is we looked at the different ways that energy is measured, right? We talked about how electrical energy is measured in watts or kilowatts, right? We talked about how motor energy is measured in horsepower. And so just how other forms of energy are measured, because food is also energy, it can also be measured, right? And we talked about, well, how do we measure food energy? And we said that we measure food energy via the unit of measurement called calories, right? Remember we talked about this? We talked about how calories are a measure of energy. We talked about how calorie is a unit of energy, right? Now, the next question that somebody might ask after learning this is they might ask, well, Coach Yasin, how many calories do I need to eat? How many units of energy do I actually need to eat, right? And so what I want to do right now is I want to go ahead and answer that question by giving you another question to think about. Because when you ask the question, how much should I eat? How much units of energy should I eat? It's kind of like asking the question, how much energy would be required to move my Toyota Camry 300 miles, right? Well, what type of energy, right? The question that happens after this question is, well, what type of energy does your Toyota Camry take? And it takes gasoline as the type of energy, right? It takes the fuel that this car is going to take is going to be gasoline. And so you would need approximately 11 gallons of gasoline in order to move your Toyota Camry 300 miles in the city, right? And so in the same way, humans don't use gasoline as energy. Well, if you do or to consume gasoline, please go see a doctor immediately. But normally, typically, in a healthy manner, humans don't consume gasoline as energy, right? And so instead, what do we use as energy? What do human beings use as energy? And the answer to that is that we use food. And so just like how we can measure how much energy the fuel that is inside of gas gives our cars, right? We call that gas mileage. We can measure that, right? We can actually measure what gas mileage is. We can measure how many miles our car can travel based off this amount of gas, right? In the same way, we can measure how much energy the fuel gives our bodies right? Based on calories. And so what is the gas mileage equivalent for calories, right? When you talk about gas mileage, we say, okay, hey, this is how many miles your car will be able to travel based on this amount of gas, right? So scientifically, a calorie is defined as the amount of energy that is needed to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Celsius. And so we can literally define exactly what a calorie is scientifically. And so if that doesn't prove that calories are just energy, I don't know what will, because there's literally an entire science behind calculating and measuring how much energy is in a single calorie. Literally how much energy a single calorie gives our body, we can literally scientifically measure it. Now, after learning that, some students have the question and they say, hey, cool, all right, Coach Yasin, I'm following along with you so far, but I have another question. How come that if food is just energy, then how come when I eat too much food, I get fat, right? And that's a great question. And the answer to that question is this: because fat on your body is just stored energy. Huh? Yep. When you eat too much food over a long enough period of time, it is stored as fat on your body. And so this might sound shocking to you, but the truth is this: fat is just potential stored energy. Fat is just potential stored energy. Oh, snap, right? And so now you might be wondering, like this cat is wondering, Coach Yasin, what are you saying? It's true. Let me repeat that one more time. Fat that is stored on your body is just potential stored energy. And because fat is just stored energy, we can actually calculate exactly how much energy is inside of a pound of fat, right? So in exactly the same way that we can measure how much energy is inside of a gallon of gasoline, we can also calculate, in the same way, we can calculate how much energy is stored inside of a pound of fat. And so you might not have known this. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But 1 pound of fat is equivalent to about 3,500 units of energy known as calories. And so the bottom line of all of this is that when you burn fat, that means that you are literally burning fuel, aka energy, aka calories. Think about how cool that is, right? And so a lot of times we use these terms like fat and calories and XYZ, right? But we don't actually break it down to understand what is behind the scenes. And when you break it down to understand things behind the scenes, you start to get a different perspective about these terms that we are so used to using. And so what I want to do next is I want to go ahead and explore with you what happens when your body gets full versus what happens when your car gets full, okay? So let's go ahead and explore more of what we just talked about by comparing your body to your car, okay? Because when you fill up gas inside of your car, what ends up happening is that you end up getting to the full mark, right, on your gas tank. And what you end up having to do is you end up having to stop filling gas. Why do you have to stop filling gas? Because if you don't stop filling gas, then this is what's going to happen. Because the car does not have any extra place to store that extra fuel, if you keep filling up gas past the full mark and past the full point of your gas tank, then you are going to have a gasoline overflow. It's literally going to shoot out of the tank. You should not do this. You should not put more gas in your car than what your car can handle, okay? Because the car does not have any place to be able to store all of that extra gas. Now compare this to your human body, okay? The human body, on the other hand, is insanely more amazing and insanely more intelligent than your car. Because when you fill up fuel in your gas tank, aka your body, right, by eating food, all you're doing is you're fueling your body. When you fill up food into your body, and when you get to the full mark on your gas tank inside of your body, right, your body is actually able to take in more fuel. It's able to take in more food. And instead of overflowing like your car does when you actually fill it more than the tank is able to fill up, your body actually says, you know what? This extra energy that we are being fueled right now, It's so precious. It's too precious. You know what? It makes no sense to waste it like these dumb cars do. They literally just overflow gasoline, right? Those dumb cars. We're smarter. We have our human bodies, okay? And so this energy is too precious. And so instead, what we're going to do is we're going to store this extra energy as fat. And so what the human body does is, instead of overflowing gasoline and instead of overflowing fuel like the car does, the human body actually stores that extra energy and stores it as fat. Now let's look at what happens at the opposite end of this. Let's go ahead and compare what happens to your car when it gets on empty versus what happens to your body when it gets on empty, right? What happens to your car when you don't put any more fuel, aka gasoline, into it? And once it actually hits the empty point inside of the gas tank, what happens to your car? What happens to your car is that it stops. The car has no more energy to function, and so therefore it is unable to function. It basically just dies, right? But if we compare that to what the human body actually does, right? When your human body gets to the E, when it gets to empty inside of the gas tank, it's so much more smarter than your car is, because it knows, your human body knows, that the number one priority that it has is to keep you alive. And so it was designed to survive in a time in which there was a lack of fuel, in which there was a lack of food. Your body was designed to be able to survive in those times. And so instead, the body, what it does is that it stores that fuel for exactly those times when the energy tank goes to empty. And so in your body, when the energy tank actually goes to empty, what does it do? Well, it just taps into the fuel, aka the stored energy reserves that it had been saving for exactly that time. And so even when there is nothing left in the tank, the human body is still able to function and keep us alive by using that stored potential energy, aka fat. How cool is that? Think about that for a second. When your car on one end, right? Your car, it runs out of gas. It runs out of any fuel or energy inside of the gas tank. It just stops. And yet your body, when it runs out of energy, actually has this reserve of energy that it's able to pull from. And so the question is, how long can the human body actually last for? How long can the human body actually go on while the gas tank is on empty? Well, that depends on how much potential energy is stored inside of the reserves. Because remember, 1 pound of fat is 3,500 units of energy, aka calories. Okay? Think about that for a second. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how to understand fat and food from an unemotional, principle-based terms perspective, okay? Because so many people, maybe yourself included, maybe others that you know, have been telling themselves stories about fat and food and those kinds of things for so long, it's very, very, very easy for us to misconstrue in our minds what these principles and what these concepts actually are. And so much of society has gotten confused with XYZ diet and da-da-da-da-da and da-da-da-da-da and whatever, right? And so when you actually understand what that food is, just fuel, it's just energy that is measured scientifically by a measurement that is called calories, and you understand it like a car and gasoline fuel, it makes it so much easier to understand. And so when you understand that fat is just stored energy, it starts to remove the shame and the guilt and the emotions around it. And it allows us to be able to have a better mental understanding that works better for us. And the cool part about this is that when we understand that fat is just stored potential energy, what that means is that potential energy, from a perspective shift, from a lens shift point of view, is that those who are overweight, those who have more fat storage on their body, are actually having more potential energy than those who have less potential energy on their body. And so as a perspective shift for maybe yourself or for maybe others that you know, is that those who are overweight actually have that potential energy that they can use in order to do amazing things with their life. And so you see, when you have that perspective shift that, okay, fat is really just potential energy, and I can use potential energy in whatever way I want, and so I could use it in order to do amazing things in life. And so that perspective shift is very helpful, because at the end of the day, all of what we just spoke about is really just thermodynamics, it's the laws of physics, and it's the laws of the universe. How cool is that, right? Now, what does all of this stored energy look like on our bodies? So what I went ahead and did is I got ahead and put together some visual examples. I went ahead and found these for you guys. Is that this right here is 1 pound of fat. Okay. And so 1 pound of fat, this is what it looks like when we say, oh, I only lost 1 pound this week, or I've only lost 5 pounds this month, or whatever that might be. Well, I'm going to show you what that visually looks like. Okay. So 1 pound of fat, and this is not a normal sized mug right here. This is one of those large, like special boutique type of mugs. And so 1 pound of fat is not a small amount of potential energy that is stored on your body. In the same way, if we look at 5 pounds of fat, okay, I actually have one of these. I used to have it in my office back in the day. This is a massive amount. Like, it's a really, really big amount in person, okay? Same thing, 10 pounds of fat. Really, really big amount, right? What does 15 pounds of fat look like? What does 20 pounds of fat look like? Again, remember, this is potential stored energy, and this is what it looks like visually on our bodies when we are carrying it around. And so what I want to do for you right now is I want to go ahead and put together everything that we've just spoken about and really put it together in a working model for you, okay? So let's go ahead and take this new understanding that we have of food and calories, and let's go ahead and put it all together, okay? So visually, what we have spoken about so far, this is what it looks like. You have the energy that you eat minus the energy that you burn, and that results in the energy that you either have a surplus of, that you have a deficit of, or that the equation is balanced out and you just end up maintaining, right? And so if I just go ahead and show you this visual down here, is that depending on if you have more or less energy, then you will either store that energy, you will either maintain that energy, or you will lose the energy. And so this is what it looks like. If right here, if you have an energy surplus, that energy will be stored as fat, or if you are working out, it will build muscle, okay? If the energy ends up being a net negative, and it ends up being exactly the same, then you will maintain the amount of energy that is stored on your body. And if you end up having energy that you need to use, then you're going to actually be in a energy deficit. And so therefore your body is going to tap into those fat reserves and start burning that energy, okay? So I want to go ahead and walk you through a couple of examples so that way you can better understand what it is that we are talking about here, okay? So right here, this is the first example that I have for you, is that this is the energy that you eat, okay? This green line right here, this is the energy that you eat. And so let's say, for example, you eat this much and you burn less than you eat. So what that means is that in between that you actually have more energy left over. And so just like we learned, instead of allowing that leftover energy to go to waste, like your cars literally just spit it out because it can't hold it, right? The human body, because it's smart, what it does is it takes that extra energy that is left over and it stores it as fat, or it'll use it in order to build muscle, okay? So this is the first example. The second example is, let's say, for example, you went ahead and the amount of energy that you ate was exactly the same as the amount of energy that you burned. And so in that case, you actually end up resulting in a zero. So you're in a caloric maintenance, okay? So this was a caloric surplus, means you had more calories than you actually burned, and so it got stored. In this case, this was exactly the same amount, and so you maintained. And then finally, in the last example on here, this is basically where you ate a certain amount, but you burned more than you ate. So therefore the red was higher than the green. And so you actually needed energy because you wouldn't have been able to burn this amount. And so what the body did is it went ahead and tapped into its energy reserves. It went into its fat storages, and you were in a caloric deficit. That's what we call it. We call it a caloric deficit. And so when you're in a caloric deficit, the body is utilizing the stored energy in order to fuel itself. In order to burn that energy, it had to tap into more of those fat reserves. And so that's the conceptual understanding. Now I want to walk you through it with numbers. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about what it would look like if we actually put numbers to this. Let's say, for example, the amount of energy that you ate was 3,000 calories, aka units of energy, and the amount of energy that you burned was 2,000 units of energy, aka calories. So if you do the math on here, 3,000 minus 2,000 means that you were left over with 1,000 calories over. And so this is what we call a caloric surplus, just like we spoke about in the previous example. So these additional calories, rather than being wasted, the body actually stores these as fat, or if you're working out, it'll go ahead and to a point, to a degree, use those extra calories in order to build muscle, okay? That's the first example. Let's go ahead and look at the second example with numbers, okay? So same as the first example here, but the second example now is where you ate 2,000 calories, 2,000 units of energy, and then you burned 2,000 units of energy. And so in this case, in this simple mathematical equation, there is 0 calories left over. And so as a result, there is no calories to store. There is no need to use any fat reserves. And as a result, this is called caloric maintenance, okay? And so as a result, the energy in your body, the reserves are just maintenance. They're balanced, equal, okay? And so finally, in the third example on here, let's say, for example, you ate 1,500 units of energy, but you burned 2,000 units of energy. If that's the case, then what that means is that you actually have a negative, okay? 1,500 minus 2,000 equals negative 500 calories. And so you need 500 units more of energy in order to keep you alive, in order to do all the activities that you were doing XYZ. Now, instead of shutting the body down once it hits 0, what the body does instead, because it wants to keep you alive, is it's going to go ahead and go into your fat storages, and it's going to pull out of your fat storages 500 calories of energy. And this is what we call being in a caloric deficit. And so when you are in a caloric deficit, you are burning more than you are eating. And so therefore the body has to go in and utilize the fat storages that it has. Now, a quick note on this, even though we are talking about this maybe on like a daily basis, right? I'm saying, hey, 1,500 units of energy per day, 2,000 units of energy per day. The truth is that it's not an exact science. As you will learn throughout this module, you don't lose fat or gain fat on a daily basis. It's more like happening on a weekly or a longer time horizon basis, okay? But I just want to go ahead and mention that for those of you who might be like, oh, okay, so if I 1,500 minus 2,000, 500 calories of fat every day. This is for example purposes so you can understand the concept, but practically in your body, it happens a little bit slower on a larger time horizon. Now, the other part of this is that it's not only that it works that you can keep one end of the equation stable. It actually works because of the fact that on this end, you can actually keep stable the energy that you eat. And so you could just eat 3,000 calories every single day. And then you could, to a degree, to a point, as you're going to learn later inside of this training, you can adapt and change how many calories that you burn, how much energy that you burn. And you could end up with, hey, 3,000 calories eaten, 2,000 calories burned, 1,000 calories surplus. Same thing over here, 0, 3,000 calories eaten, 3,500 calories burned, negative 500 caloric deficit, right? And then on this other end of the equation, you could keep the amount of energy that you burn stable, and instead you could change the amount of energy that you eat. And so you could have 3,000 minus 2,000 plus 1,000, 2,000, 2,000, 0, 1,500, 2,000, negative 500. And so in the same way, you can actually kind of mess around with this on both sides of the equation, depending on lifestyle factors and those kinds of things that we're going to talk about inside of this training. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, that is how all diets work. It does not matter what diet it is. If it is about gaining weight, if it is about losing weight, is it about maintaining weight? It's all about the exact same things. And so I'm going to go ahead and give the example of losing weight, because typically when people use the word diet, they're talking about losing weight. But this is exactly the same way that the keto diet works, intermittent fasting, paleo, low fat, Weight Watchers, sugar-free, Whole30. It does not matter what diet it is. They all say what to do is different things, but how they all work in order to help somebody lose weight is they put the person into a caloric deficit. And what does that mean? AKA they eat fewer calories. And what does that mean? It means that they eat less energy, okay? And so it does not matter what diet it is. It does not matter if tomorrow they come up with the next crazy diet, like the rabbit diet, in which you're only allowed to eat lettuce and carrots. It does not matter if it's the water diet, in which you only eat or drink water. It does not matter if it's the air diet, in which you only eat or drink air. It does not matter if it's the dance in the rain diet, okay? No eating or drinking allowed, only dancing in the rain is allowed, okay? It does not matter what the next hot fad diet is that promises to help you lose weight. They all work exactly the same way, which is putting you inside of a caloric deficit, which is basically eating fewer calories than you actually burn. And to really hit this point home, I want to go ahead and give you one more visual example to really go ahead and hit this home for you, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about this in another visual example, okay? So let's say, for example, that this circle right here on the left represents the total daily amount of calories that somebody needs to eat in order to maintain their fat storages on their body, aka maintain weight, okay? Now, these total daily calories in order to maintain their weight is going to be distributed between different macronutrients, right? These are the macronutrients that we've already talked about. There are only three. There are fats, carbs, and proteins. Now, I'm not saying that you need to eat equal amounts of fat, carbs, and protein. We're going to talk more about that in an upcoming training, okay? I'm just giving an example that let's say this total daily amount of calories is going to be distributed between all of the different macros in some proportion, in some way, shape, or form, okay? Then, let's say, for example, this person decides that they are going to go ahead and get onto the keto diet, right? And now the keto diet says, yo, low carbs. We're going to go low carbs all the way. And so this person, they went from eating fats, carbs, and proteins, and those fats, carbs, and proteins were making up their total caloric needs that was helping them maintain their weight. And now all of a sudden they've gone from eating fats, carbs, and protein to only eating fats and protein. And so if they do the keto diet the proper way, what that means is that they are automatically going to be in a caloric deficit, right? Because they're eating the same amount of fats and the same amount of proteins that they were eating before, but now they have this leftover chunk right here. They have this leftover chunk that used to be carbs, and now all of a sudden the body is in a deficit because of the fact that it has to go out and fill up this energy that is left over right here. And where is it going to go ahead and get that energy from? You guessed it, it's going to get it from its energy reserves, aka its fat storage, okay? And so this is why the keto diet works for many people, as well as a number of other reasons because, their preference and that kind of stuff, which we'll talk about in an upcoming training. But from a caloric perspective, this is the reason why the keto diet works. It's only at the end of the day, caloric deficit. And so it has nothing to do with carbs or fats or proteins or anything like that for weight loss or weight gain or weight maintenance. It just has to do with the fact that the person ended up not eating carbs anymore. So by automatic default, they have a caloric deficit, okay? And so that extra remaining amount of calories that your body needs, where does it get it from? By burning fat. Now, here's where that exact same quote unquote diet could go wrong, right? Is that person, they were eating their total daily amount of calories in order to maintain their weight, and they were getting it from fats, carbs, and protein. And then they went and said, cool, I'm going to take out carbs, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the same amount of carbs that I was eating, and I'm going to replace that with just more fat. And I'm going to replace that with just more protein. And not only that, but wait a second. Now that I'm not eating carbs, I'm actually going to go ahead and eat even more fats and even more protein than I was doing before. And so as a result, now that person is eating more calories than they were eating total before, right? And so now in this example, this person is actually gaining weight while on the quote unquote keto diet, even though they're only eating fat and protein. The reason why is it that they're now gaining weight because they're only eating fats and proteins is because it wasn't about the carbs. It was all about the calories. You can literally gain weight only eating fat. You can gain weight only eating protein. You can gain weight only eating carbs, regardless of what it is. It's all about the calories. You can literally get overweight eating quote unquote healthy food, or what you think is healthy food, right? Even though we're going to talk about how there's no such thing as good or bad food, but you can get fat on any one of these diets. You can get overweight on any one of these diets. You can lose weight on any one of these diets because it's all about the calories. And so when people are chasing different diets to lose weight, what they don't understand is that what society is doing is that they're just creating this new thing, when in reality, the principle behind it is very simple. At the end of the day, the principle is the total energy units that you eat minus the total energy units that you burn equals the amount of energy that is either stored or used up as fat. And so that can happen in one of two ways. Either the energy that you eat is going to be less than the energy that you burn, and then you end up in a caloric deficit, or the energy that you burn is more than the energy that you ate, and therefore you end up in a caloric deficit, okay? Those are the only two ways that you can end up in a caloric deficit, okay? Now, does that mean that these diets don't have any other purpose, right? Well, yes, right? Some diets have different preferences and those things that we're going to explore in upcoming trainings inside of this module, right? There are other goals other than weight loss for some of these diets, right? Is there a benefit from eating carbs, fats, and proteins in different macronutrient distributions? Yes, there are other goals that align with those things. But for the purposes of weight loss and for the purposes of what these diets are marketing for the promise of weight loss, they all work exactly the same way. All they are doing is coming up with a new unique mechanism for their marketing to make it sound different. So that way, those who have failed with dieting in the past will give their new diet that these billion-dollar companies have come up with another chance, okay? And so in the end, the truth about all diets when it comes to weight loss is that it's all about the calories and it's all about the caloric deficit, okay? Now, I do want to just go ahead and warn you. This is not only for weight loss. Do not be fooled into thinking that we are only talking about weight loss here, okay? All of what we have just talked about also applies to weight gain. It also applies to muscle gain. It also applies to overall health. And so if you come to me and you say, oh, but you know what, Coach Yasin, I'm not interested in helping people lose weight. I'm not about the whole weight loss kind of thing, right? Then what you've done is you've completely misunderstood the point of this training. I am just using weight loss as an example more often than not, because most people, that's typically what the market is about, is more people are interested in weight loss, okay? But these same concepts that we are talking about are universal and are critical for all health goals, period. They are literally talking about how your body and your health work in general. So don't misunderstand it. And just because you might have a belief, because you might have had an instance or a story about weight loss and the weight loss industry, and as a result, you've made an assumption about it, right? Don't come and project that belief that you have onto these topics and say, oh, you know, this is only about weight loss and, you know, I don't want to help people with weight loss. No. Think bigger than that and understand that these concepts that we're talking about are absolutely critical for health in general. And this is where I want you to reflect for a second. I want you to reflect on the transformation approach that we are talking about here, because do you now see how powerful the approach that we are utilizing is, right? In the Remote Wellness Academy, you are learning a completely different approach to what everyone else out there teaches. There is no school, no college, no university, institute, degree, or certification that teaches these concepts from the foundational principles perspective in as simple as the way that you are learning it right now. Why is that the case? The reason that's the case is because all of these organizations and all of these degrees and certifications, their approach is all about information. When at the Remote Wellness Academy, our approach is about transformation. Okay. And so that truly is where the true value of remote wellness is in the transformation. It's about helping people bridge the gap between knowledge and action. It's about helping people bridge the gap between knowing and doing. That's what transformation is, versus information just gives them more and more knowledge, and all of a sudden they have all of this knowledge and they know all of these things, but they're unable to actually do it. And so our focus and our approach is we're combining both and allowing it to be focused more on the transformation side and bridging that gap between the knowledge and the action. And the beautiful part about this, as we've spoken many times about before, is that people will pay a handsome premium for you to be able to help them with this, okay? And so that's why this transformation approach is so completely different here at RWA, is because this approach was designed to bridge the gap between knowing and doing, and that is only possible because we are focused on transformation, not information. Now, with that being said, the other concern that I want to go ahead and address right now is typically some students and some people in general will say things like, hey, you know what? It's my fill in the blank is causing me to gain weight, right? Many people will say, hey, you know, I have thyroid problems. That's what's causing me to gain weight. I have a slow metabolism. That's what's causing me to gain weight. I'm on this medication right now, and that's what's causing me to gain or lose weight. But what I want you to do right now is that now that you have a foundational principles understanding of exactly how weight and fat and calories work, as you are listening to me inside of this training right now, what I want you to do is I want you to evaluate these statements, okay? I want you to think about them for a second. Is it possible for someone's thyroid to make them gain or lose weight? Think about that. Because the answer is no, it's not. Because the truth is that your thyroid and the thyroid hormones don't have any calories. Your metabolism doesn't have any calories. Your medication that somebody might be taking doesn't have any calories. But what does have calories? Food has calories. And so the only way to be able to have someone or yourself gain weight is to be able to have inputs that have calories, aka food. And so it's literally the laws of physics and it's literally the laws of thermodynamics. It's not possible to gain mass unless you consume something that has mass, okay? And so it's literally impossible for anything other than calories to make you or anyone else gain weight. Now, the reason why this is so important to know is because do you remember we talked about the power of belief in module 2, right? We talked about how powerful beliefs actually are, right? Remember we talked about the guy, he believed that he had cancer and he died because of his belief. Remember we talked about that? And so the reason why this is very important is because for you and your students, it's very critical for you to understand the truth about how the body works rather than becoming victims to disempowering beliefs that, oh, you know what, it's my thyroid hormones that are causing me to gain weight. Oh, you know what, it's this medication that is causing me to lose weight. Oh, it's XYZ that is causing me to do the XYZ, right? We talked about this in module number 2. It's all of those beliefs that cause people to be able to have certain situations inside of their life. And this is something that we're going to explore more of when we talk about the who of nutrition, okay? Now, other common beliefs that have a lot of power over people is that sometimes it's not uncommon for students to start to create their own reality and really start to hide how much shame and guilt that they feel around maybe their eating habits, around how they've been behaving over a long enough period of time. And so what some students will say is they'll say things like, hey, you know what? I don't even eat that much. I don't know why I keep gaining weight. You know, I really only eat salads all day long. I don't know why I'm overweight. Right? But once you can help a student understand the foundations and the principles, it's at that point that you can help them get past this limited reality that they have created for themselves, these stories that they are telling themselves because they are ignorant and uneducated on the foundations and the principles. You can start to empower them, right? And you can actually get them to deal with the real problem at hand. But sometimes what ends up happening is that these stories and the character that this person has become over too long of a period of time, they end up becoming extremely close-minded and their version 1.0 character's beliefs are too strong. And so sometimes as a coach, I'm going to emphasize I right here for a second. Coach Yasin, will engage in helping them break their character. And how do I do that? I typically do that by using this coaching frame. This is something that you're going to learn more about in an upcoming module. But when a student tells me, hey, you know, I don't eat that much food at all, right? I don't know why I keep gaining weight, right? To help them break their character, sometimes what I might say is I might say, hey, you know, we need to call the World Health Organization really as soon as possible. And the immediate response for the student is like, huh? Why? Like, what are you talking about? Coach Yasin, what's going on here, right? And then I'll say, hey, you know, we need to get you into a lab as soon as possible. That's why we got to call the World Health Organization. And then again, the student's going to be confused. They're going to say, hey, I'm so confused. What are you saying, Coach Yasin? And then I'll say, well, you know, you just told me that you don't eat any food and yet you continue to gain weight. And we need to get you into a lab and get the scientists to study you because there's something that is going on with your body that is allowing you to defy the laws of physics, the laws of thermodynamics, the laws of the universe. You're literally defying all of them, right? And so if we can figure out what this ability that you have is, then we can get this over to the rest of the world that is dying from starvation because you somehow have some magical ability that is going to allow us to be able to solve world hunger, right? And then usually at this point, the student's version 1.0 self will break and they'll start to take ownership around what it is that they are talking about, okay? Now, I do want to go ahead and note, this is not a beginner level coaching technique that I just went ahead and gave you an example of, okay? You're going to learn more about this in module number 4, but you should never be combative with students. It is not conducive to the learning experience, right? It makes students go into fight or flight mode when you do things like this that are a little bit more aggressive, okay? You don't want to do that. Never do that. Okay, you want to make sure that you understand this is an advanced coaching technique. It's really something that I will only utilize when a student is being closed-minded and continues to make excuses. Okay, so do not apply this by yourself without learning the foundations of coaching first, which is going to be in module 4. Okay, otherwise you're going to just end up in fights with people. But the reason I'm showing you this inside of this training is because I wanted to go ahead and really hit this concept home for you, is that it's not anything else that causes somebody to gain or lose or maintain weight. At the end of the day, it's just calories, it's just mass, it's just inputs, okay? And so this is why it's very important to understand and be able to break all of those beliefs that you yourself might have, or in the future, what your students might have around how this entire process of weight gain, muscle gain, weight loss, fat maintenance, weight maintenance, how all of this works. This is the core truth behind it, and you want to make sure that you break a lot of those false beliefs that you might have. So with that being said, what I want to go ahead and move into now is I do want to go ahead and talk to you about putting all of this into practice, because at this point, you now truly understand the truth behind diets and how energy and your body works. And so the natural next question that students ask is, okay, this is great, Coach Yasin, but how do I actually put this into practice, right? How do I actually talk about the energy that I eat, the energy that I burn, and then I have an energy surplus or an energy deficit, right? And so a lot of times, common questions that students will have at this point is like, okay, this is all very nice, Coach Yasin, but how do I know how much energy that I need to eat in order to lose weight? How much energy do I need to burn to lose weight? How much energy do I need to burn in order to maintain weight? How much energy do I need to eat in order to gain weight? In order to burn in order to gain weight? How much energy do I need to eat in order to gain muscle, right? How much energy do I need in order to maintain the muscle mass that I have, right? What does it mean for me specifically to be in a caloric deficit? What are my maintenance calories, right? And other questions that students might have is energy that I burn the same as metabolism, right? When you talk about this part of the equation, is this the same as metabolism, right? What the heck is metabolism in the first place, right? Do I even have a fast or do I have a slow metabolism, right? And all of those questions, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is exactly what we are going to get into and answer next. And so what we are going to do right now is we're going to go ahead and break up this topic into 2 parts. We're first going to break up this topic into part 1, which is how much to burn, and then part 2 is how much to eat. And so inside of this training, we are going to go over how much to burn, and then over the course of the next training, we're going to talk about how much to eat. And so you can see here, this is exactly the parts of this equation: energy you burn, energy you eat. And so we're going to go ahead and talk about energy you burn first inside of this training. Now, the natural question that you might have is, but coach, why talk about energy that we burn first, right? Isn't energy that you burn the second part of this equation, right? Why not talk about the energy that you eat first? And that, my friend, is a phenomenal question. And so although we could talk about it both ways, it's typically easier if we start with the energy that you burn. And when we figure that out, then it becomes a lot easier to figure out how much that we got to eat. Because in this, as you're about to learn here in a second, there are some variables that we can't control. And so once we learn this, then we can go ahead and influence this a lot easier. Cool? So that's literally how we're going to go ahead and break up these trainings. Now, one thing I do want to go ahead and emphasize is that these 2 trainings that we're about to talk about will completely transform your understanding of nutrition and unlock your ability to see through all of the insanity that society is going through right now when it comes to diets and nutrition, okay? Literally, this might be you at the end of these 2 trainings. Maybe. Just maybe, okay? And for all those students who might be going through this training right now and might be thinking, yeah, but I'm already familiar with all of this. Listen to me. Stick with me for a second, okay? I promise that you have never heard about what it is that we're about to talk about inside of this training. And you definitely have never heard about how is it that we are going to explain these topics inside of this training, okay? So it's going to be completely revolutionary for you, and it's absolutely going to blow your mind as well, even if you are familiar with some of these topics, okay? So let's go ahead and dive right into it. But before we dive right into it, I do want to go ahead and do a little bit of a pulse check, okay? Kind of like this guy right here who's taking his office chair to the beach. I do want to go ahead and take a pulse check because we need to be more like this guy, possibly at this point in the training, okay? So I want to check in. How are you doing so far? Remember, if you do need to take a break, you can break up this training up, okay? And this right here, I'm going to do a good job of making sure that I can let you know what points are a good point to take a break from. So if you do need a break, you don't have to take a break, right? If you're on a roll right now, keep on sticking with me right now. But if you do need a break, this is a good point in the training to do that. You can literally just sit back, just look away from the computer for a second if you need it. If you got to stand up, move around a little bit, if you need it, this is the point to do so as we start to get into the second half of this training right now. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the action and let's talk about what is metabolism. All right. So many people use this word metabolism without actually ever knowing what the heck it even is, right? And so many people carry so many false beliefs about metabolism their entire life, and they ask questions that they don't even know what metabolism actually is. And so they will ask questions like, is my metabolism fast? Is my metabolism slow? Does metabolism run in my family? Does anyone run in my family? Right? So many questions, so few answers. And so many people have no idea what metabolism even is. And so for the vast majority of society, metabolism is this abstract, vague concept. It's kind of like the metabolism boogeyman that's inside of the closet, that they have no idea what metabolism actually even is, right? And so when they say the word metabolism, it's like they go through their entire life with this boogeyman word metabolism that is haunting them, and they believe, remember power of belief that we talked about? They believe that, I have a slow metabolism. That's the reason that I can't lose weight. That's the reason that I can't achieve my goals in my health. It's because I have this slow metabolism. Well, if you ask them, well, sir or madam, what is a metabolism? Do you understand what metabolism is? They have no idea. And so they carry these false beliefs like a boogeyman for their entire life, and it really cripples them in terms of what they can and cannot do. And so this is why it's so important to actually define terms. And literally, just on this topic right here about the importance of defining terms, I can make an entire training on this concept alone. Like I literally almost included that content and that training inside of this training, but it ended up being too long because the importance of defining terms cannot be underestimated, okay? Because you have to understand this. Most fights, most disagreements, most confusion in life comes from people not defining terms properly, right? They literally just walk around, I think you mean this. I think you mean that. I think you meant this, right? And so defining words matters. Why? Because like we talked about in a previous training, we talked about identity statements in module number 2, right? Because words are just labeled thoughts. And so if we never define words, then we'll never able to actually understand and learn from them. So if we never actually define metabolism, we will never actually be able to understand what metabolism actually is. And so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and together define this abstract word called metabolism. And so that's what we want to go ahead and talk about next, which is defining metabolism. And so when most people think and talk about metabolism, typically, because they have no idea what they're talking about, they typically talk about a singular thing in our body. But the truth is that the metabolism is not a singular thing. And most people, what they do is they think of it like a black box, right? They think of it like a small engine that stuff goes into and stuff comes out of. But the truth is that our metabolism is a collection of many things. And so in a single answer, our metabolism is the sum of all the metabolic processes in our body that convert food into energy. That's in a single answer, okay? So that's it, right? We're done. Training over. Then how come there's still a whole bunch of stuff left in this training, right? You're looking at the timestamp on this training and you're like, the training's not over, coach. Well, yes, exactly. So if obviously that was the only answer to metabolism, then we'd be wrapped up and we'd be ready to go, right? And if it was that easy, then everyone would already know what metabolism is. And so unfortunately, this is where things get confusing for those who don't have the opportunity to study here at RWA. Because if you go out and search what is metabolism, then you're going to find that so many different people refer to metabolism as so many different things. And so they take the singular answer, and from the singular answer, they come up with so many different understandings of metabolism, right? And the problem that we have when we don't have a clear understanding of what metabolism actually is that it becomes very, very difficult for us to actually have a clear measurement, okay? Because when you don't have a clear definition, you don't have a clear measurement. And when we can't exactly measure metabolism, when we don't actually have a clear definition of exactly how much energy I burn, then it's very difficult for us to be able to figure out the second part of this equation, which is, well, how much energy do I need to eat? Because at the end of the day, this is a quote that I really love, is that which gets measured gets managed, okay? And so in other words, once we define it, we can actually measure it. And so that's why it's very important for us to get on the same page of all of the definitions and all of the understandings of what metabolism actually is. Now, the good news, because there is good news for all this, the good news is that here at Remote Wellness Academy, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and solve all of this for you. All of this confusion around metabolism, we're going to solve that for you. And how we're going to do that is we're going to define, measure, and understand metabolism once and for all. How? Introducing the one and only, what we call the 5 levels of understanding metabolism, okay? We're going to talk about here inside of this training, the 5 levels of understanding metabolism, which is the energy that you burn, right? The energy that you burn is your metabolism and understanding your metabolism. And we're going to talk about the 5 levels upon which you can understand metabolism. Now, immediately after hearing this, the very first question that you might have is, levels of understanding metabolism? Well, what the heck? Like, why talk about this at different levels? Why talk about metabolism and understanding it at different levels? Well, my follow-up question to you would be, do you remember what our main goal is here inside of module number 3? Do you remember what we are doing inside of the Remote Wellness Academy and where you are so far inside of the program, right? Right now, you are inside of phase number 1, which is where you are getting your remote wellness certification, which is going to allow you to provide value and which is going to provide you the power that you can then put into production when we get into the income and business training, right? And what we are doing inside of module number 3 is we said that this entire module number 3, is where you get a massive toolbox of understanding for you to be able to transform your health and the health of your students. And so the reason why it's important to have a depth of understanding at different levels when we talk about metabolism is so that way you can communicate at different levels of understanding of metabolism. Because by the end of this training, you will be able to communicate with a 5-year-old about what metabolism is, or you can have a conversation with a research scientist about what metabolism is, and every single level in between. So this is the value of speaking about metabolism at different levels. Not only will you be able to know exactly what level someone is referring to when they talk about metabolism, because everyone and their grandma has a different definition and understanding of metabolism, right? Because out in the real world, most people have no idea what level they're talking about. And so as a result, when you understand all of the levels of understanding of metabolism, then you can go ahead and adjust yourself to the level that they are speaking to, right? And so you'll be equipped to talk at their level if needed. And so this is the value of the remote wellness certification that you are going through right now, is that you become an asset that is so extremely valuable to every single person that you communicate with. And that does not matter if that person is a child, and it does not matter if that person is an expert. You can help transform each and every single human being when you come across them because of what you are learning inside of this program. And then all of this applies specifically to the different levels of understanding metabolism as well. Now, the second question that students will have when they first hear about the 5 levels of understanding metabolism is they ask the question, hey, am I going to talk to my students about metabolism in levels? Some students get confused. At this point, they get scared and they say, oh no, how in the world am I going to be able to talk to my students about this? Like, it's too complex. Coach Yasin, I can't do all this stuff that you talk about, or you're making these trainings and you're doing all this stuff. I can't do that. It's too complex. Slow down. I want to make this very clear. You will not be speaking to your students about this concept in this way, especially not initially, okay? In fact, most of the concepts that you are learning and most of the concepts that you have already learned inside of module number 3 as a whole is not going to be how you structure your transformation program. Remember, this program is structured this way because you are getting your certification and you are getting your toolbox all put together. You always want to make sure you remember that. And so don't worry, when we get over to module number 5, we're going to talk about how you're going to structure your transformation program and how you're going to talk to your students. And it's going to be much more simplified and it is going to be different. And don't worry, when we get to that point, we are going to be providing you all of the templates, the swipe files, the copy and paste, plug and play programs. So it's going to be completely effortless for you once you get your certification and you start having your own students. Okay, so I did want to just go ahead and address that concern when we first talk about the 5 levels of metabolism. Now, the last point that I want to touch on before we get into the level 1 and talk about what the first level of understanding metabolism is I do want to talk to you about what all of the other organizations and certifications and degrees do, right? Because this may be your first certification, maybe it's not your first certification. If it's not, then you'll definitely be able to nod your head to what I'm about to explain to you right now. And if this is your first certification, then you're going to be having your eyes open to what everyone else is actually doing. Because do you know what other schools, colleges, universities, institutes, degrees, or certifications in the entire world teach about metabolism? Do you know how they do it? They literally teach metabolism like this, okay? It's literally information overload. And then guess what? Those students who graduate from those other organizations, can you guess what they do in turn to their own students and their own clients? This is exactly what they do. Complete information overwhelm. All of these other organizations take their students who know nothing about metabolism. Imagine somebody just off the street, you ask them, what is metabolism? They have no idea. And then they sign up for a degree or a certification at one of these other organizations. And then immediately what these institutions do is that they take them from level 0, which is not knowing anything about metabolism. And we talked about 5 levels of metabolism, right? And also, as every single level that we talk about inside of this training, we're going to talk about how it gets more scientific and more sophisticated. But all these other organizations, what they do is they go from level 0 and boom, they go to level 5 on day number 1. And so this is what it looks like for most people who are graduating from other institutions and other degree programs, is that they go from no idea what metabolism is, they get boom, science vomited on, and then boom, they lose the student, okay? And so this is how everybody else teaches. Number 1, no idea what metabolism is, the student is open to learn. And then in the beginning, right, their brains on fire, their brains, blowing up, they're having some mind-blowing bombs over here. They're going, this is interesting. I think I'm learning. But then information overwhelm, complete information overwhelm, vomited on by science jargon, okay? And so when we talk about how we are going to simplify this concept, I do want you to be aware that it is different than how all these other organizations and degrees and certifications are talking about it, okay? Because these other organizations, what they do is they literally jump from level 0 to level 5, and they end up putting the student's brain on fire, okay? And they end up swamping their students with scientific theory and science jargon without even being able to teach them how to have a basic conversation about metabolism with their different students, okay? And so the bottom line is this. What you are about to learn about how the body burns energy, aka metabolism, is completely different than every other single school, college, university, institute, degree, or certification in the entire world. No one, absolutely no one other than the Remote Wellness Academy teaches these concepts in as simple of a way that you are about to learn. Okay. And so if you have already had certifications in the past, you're going to be able to attest to this. If you have not, I urge you, don't take my word for it. I promise you in your entire career, you are going to come back to this fact over and over and over again. We have made sure that we have grounded our teaching in simplicity and in transformation. Okay. And so what I want to do right now is just for a quick second, I do want to go ahead and interrupt our regularly scheduled program to bring a very important message, okay? Public service announcement. Vomiting information on students is disgusting, and putting people's brains on fire is inhumane. So can we all, everyone, together, can we all agree to never vomit on students or put their brains on fire by overwhelming them? Can we agree on that? And then all of those other experts who never learned how to properly teach, who never learned how to educate, who never learned how to provide transformation, how about we help them also not do this either, okay? So instead, how about we learn and understand metabolism at each of the 5 levels so that way we can talk to students depending on what level is required. Can we do that? Awesome. Thank you. And so with that being said, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes over here, and let's go ahead and talk about level 1 understanding of metabolism, which is the very first level of understanding metabolism. Okay, now level 1 understanding of metabolism is what we call the simple understanding. And this is the level that when you are speaking to someone that is new to understanding metabolism, this is the level that you typically start off at, okay? And what you do is you explain it in 7 easy steps. I'm gonna walk you through those 7 easy steps so that way you can have the level 1 understanding of metabolism as we get started here. So step 1 is going to be that your body's metabolism is like a fire in the engine inside of you, okay? So it's what provides energy. And so it's kind of like you have an engine inside of your body that gives you energy, and the metabolism is like a fire inside of that engine, okay? Step 2. Now, in order to actually fuel that fire, we need to have fuel, right? And fuel is going to come with logs or food, right? If you're sticking with the example, in order to function. And so we need fuel in order to function, okay? You can imagine you got the logs, might be like a hamburger, chicken, some avocado. Now, note, I hope this is blatantly obvious, but this does not mean that you should go out and eat wood, okay? I hope that is understood. It's just an example, okay? I just want to emphasize that just in case, okay? That's step number 2. Step number 3, this fire, this metabolism, this fire is responsible for burning the fuel that you eat and turning it into energy and or muscles, okay? And so that fuel that you ate, the logs or the food, right, is turned into energy by this fire. And so this is the visual right here. You have the fire, and then now the logs have been put into the fire, and the logs were just like the burger, the chicken, the avocado, whatever, and the metabolism is breaking it down into energy. That's step number 3. Step number 4, when you put in more fuel than the body needs for energy, your metabolism stores that excess fuel as fat. And so you can see on here, right? This person went ahead and fed the metabolism more than it needed. And so what the body did is that it stored those extra logs, that extra energy, as fat in different parts of the body. You'll see on here, all of this is stored as fat. Okay, that's step number 4. Step number 5 of understanding level 1 of metabolism. Just like in real life, if you do not feed that fire with enough fuel, then the fire will get smaller. For those of you who have ever gone camping, or maybe you have some experience with how fires work, is that if you don't fuel the fire with enough firewood, then what ends up happening is that fire actually gets smaller. So you actually have to feed it more in order to be able to get it to thrive and survive properly, okay? And so what happens is that you need to keep adding logs, aka food, to the fire, aka metabolism, in order to keep the fire burning, aka burning calories. Now, this is also the reason why sometimes for some students, eating more food, aka adding more logs into their fire, if they have not been eating a lot in the past or they've been extremely cutting back on food, right, it actually helps them lose more weight, interestingly. Right? This is the exact same reason why. It's opposite and it's counterintuitive that like, oh, eating more food because of what we just talked about, the caloric deficit, the more food is going to help me actually like lose more fat. Yes, because if your metabolism has been cut down so much because you've been in a severe caloric deficit for so long, right? You can actually get your fire to go bigger by adding more food to it to a certain extent, okay? So I just kind of broke character in my level 1 explanation here because I wanted to kind of side tangent and explain to you this as an RWA student. So that is step number 5. Then step number 6 is when you eat less than you need for energy, your metabolism goes into your fat storages and converts that fat into energy in order to make up the difference, okay? And so in this visual right here, you see here, this fire, it needs more. And so what it's doing is it's burning up the fat logs that are stored inside of the body, so that way it can make up for the amount of energy that it actually needs. And then finally, step number 7 is that when you feed the fire, aka the metabolism, the right amount of fuel, right, not overeating or undereating, then you keep the body in proper balance and you have plenty of energy and you do not gain weight. And then you end up like a smiley face. And those are the 7 steps of explaining level 1 understanding of metabolism. Okay. Now, level 1 understanding from a RWP perspective. Okay. I want to break frame. I'm not talking at a level 1 anymore. I'm going to go ahead and talk to you as an RWP. Is that level 1 understanding really is the most basic understanding of metabolism and is very helpful when you're starting with a student that might be new or might not be familiar with these concepts. Okay. Now, this is the level of understanding that you will need to make sure that you are familiar with, because typically, and a lot of times when you talk to a lot of people, because most of society is ignorant about what metabolism is, this is typically the level of understanding that you're going to start with, okay? Now, you will also notice that at this level of understanding, we did not talk about calories, we did not talk about numbers, we did not talk about deficit or surplus, right? That little part that I talked about, caloric deficit, that was me breaking character. I was just trying to talking to you as an RWP, right? We don't talk about macronutrients. We keep it very, very simple and very understandable, and so it's not at all overwhelming, right? So there's no conversation about caloric intake or numbers or any of that stuff. Nope. None of that is inside of level 1 understanding of metabolism, okay? And so this is level 1 understanding, which is the simple understanding of metabolism. And this is where we are getting started in understanding metabolism and the energy that we burn. So next, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to talk about the level 2 understanding of metabolism. So we've gone ahead and finished level 1, and we're now going to move on to level 2. Now, unlike level 1, now with level 2 onwards, we're going to actually be talking about a specific number that represents the amount of calories, aka units of energy, that your body needs. And level 2 understanding of metabolism is what we call the BMR level of understanding of metabolism. Okay, why? Because when some people talk about metabolism, what they are actually referring to is something called BMR. Okay, so the immediate question that you might have is, well, what the heck is BMR? Well, that's a great question. So BMR is short for basal metabolic rate. Okay, now you might say, hey, that sounds fancy, that sounds complicated. It's not really that fancy, and it's not really that complicated, because really what BMR is just how much energy, how many calories your specific body burns in order to keep you alive. That's literally all BMR is, okay? BMR, basal metabolic rate, is literally just how much energy, how many calories your body burns in order to actually keep you alive. And so as an example, right, I want you to imagine if you just literally stayed in bed all day with literally not moving even an inch, and you literally just watched Netflix all day, no movement, you didn't eat, you didn't drink, you didn't sleep, you just laid there for 24 hours straight. Basically like you're in a coma, not even watching Netflix. You're just in a coma. Boom, right there. The amount of calories that your body would burn during that time to fuel important basic functions like breathing and pumping blood and keeping your heart alive and keeping your organs alive and your body's heat and all of that kind of stuff, right? Everything that would be encompassed with keeping your body alive so that way you could survive, that is your basal metabolic rate, BMR. And so when some people are referring to metabolism, again, remember, because everybody is not knowing what the heck they're talking about, when some people refer to metabolism, this is what they are referring to. This is the level 2 understanding of metabolism. Now, I do understand that this is a new term, okay? I do understand that. But don't worry. We're going to be saying this term over and over and over again. It's going to become ingrained into your memory. You will not have to have it memorized, okay? So do not get overwhelmed as we go inside of this training and talk about new terms. We're going to talk about new acronyms, okay? Just like everything else in life, with repetition, you will get it. It is easy if you believe it is easy, okay? So stick with me. Do not get overwhelmed with these new terms. BMR, basal metabolic rate, simple. We're going to be able to go through it together, okay? Now, the next question after you learn about BMR might be, well, is everyone's BMR the same, right? How do we actually calculate BMR, right? Because if metabolism at this level of understanding is BMR, then I want to calculate what my metabolism is. I want to calculate what my BMR is. And so here's the thing. Because everyone has different bodies, there are actually different amounts of energy, aka different amounts of calories that are needed to keep each of us alive. And so how do we calculate the amount of BMR calories that our body needs in order to keep us alive? Well, there are many, many, many ways in order to try to calculate BMR, right? Today, there's like water body pod composition analysis in laboratories you can do. There's things called DEXA scans that you can do that cost money. Some of them don't cost money, whatever it might be, that will literally analyze your body and tell you how many calories that your specific body needs in order to stay alive, aka your BMR, right? But You don't have to go out and do that in order to figure out your estimated BMR. Why? Because over the decades, many different people have created different equations to try to figure out what is your basal metabolic rate. And the beautiful thing about this is that these mathematical equations will pretty much get you 5 to 10% within the ballpark of even some of those laboratory equipment, all that fancy schmancy stuff. The equations do a perfectly good job. And so some famous equations that are often used to estimate BMR include the Mifflin equation, includes the McArdle equation, the Harris-Benedict, as well as the revised Harris-Benedict equation. All these are different equations that people have come up with, and these are just the scientists' names that they have come up with in order to estimate BMR. And these equations take into consideration things like your weight, your height, your gender, your age, and sometimes even body fat percentage to come up with an estimated BMR, okay? And many people sometimes get caught up in trying to figure out what the best equation is for estimating their BMR, and really that's just a waste of time. The reason why that's a waste of time is because no BMR equation is going to be 100% accurate for all people under all circumstances, okay? Your lifestyle or genetics, your diet, your daily habits, your diet history, all of those make your actual BMR a moving target, and that's something that these equations are never going to actually be able to calculate, okay? And on top of that, each of these different equations, they actually all estimate BMR within 100 to 200 calories of each other. And so the difference is just too small for us to get obsessed over what equation is the best, right? And luckily, these equations don't have to be 1,000% accurate in order to be useful for us. Why? Because at the end of the day, we just need to have an idea of where to start when we talk about BMR. Because remember, these really are just estimates. And when we talk about them just being estimates, they're just estimations for us to be able to get started, right? But then the question you might ask is, okay, well, Coach Yasin, how do I know what my actual BMR is for my specific body? Well, we're going to talk more about that in this training as well as in future trainings. But I just want you to know right now that these equations are really just starting points. So we can start our journey on weight loss, weight gain, muscle gain, weight maintenance, whatever that might be, if you've never done this before, right? And then also for the activity for this specific training, at the end of this training, we're going to actually be utilizing these equations to estimate your starting BMR as well. So you are going to get practice with this topic as well, okay? Now, real quick, as we start to close out level 2 understanding, I do want to go ahead and touch on a last couple points on here. Point number 1, RMR, BMR, my brain on fire are. What does that mean? BMR is sometimes also used interchangeably with a term called RMR, okay? RMR is short for resting metabolic rate. Do not worry, you don't have to memorize these, but I do just want you to know that RMR measures the amount of calories in your body while you are at rest, and BMR calculates the minimum number of calories that your body needs to perform the most basic functions, okay? So what does that mean in truth, in practicality? In practice, there is not a big difference between BMR and RMR, okay? And the primary difference is that based on how it's measured, that is primarily the difference on there, but BMR is considered to be a more accurate calculation, but practically, like I said, there is no difference for our purposes. So for simplicity's sake, don't worry about RMR. I did just want to mention it in case you come across it in the real world. But for the sake of the training and for the sake of the academy, we are going to use the term BMR. The other point about level 2 understanding of metabolism is, well, hey, why do I need to understand level 2 of metabolism? The reason why it's important to understand level 2 of metabolism is because of the fact that all of the other levels that we are about to talk about, level 3, level 4, and level 5, are going to build upon level 2 understanding of metabolism, okay? Also, the other reason why it's important for you to understand level 2 of metabolism is because there are many people out there that when they use the word metabolism, what they are actually referring to is BMR. Okay. And so when they use terms like resting metabolism, this is the level that they are talking at. Okay. And so every level that you continue to go deeper on the 5 levels, you're going to not only understand metabolism more and more, but we're also going to be getting more and more scientific as we talk about the deeper levels of metabolism. Okay, so this has been level 2 understanding of the energy that you burn, aka metabolism. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into level 3 understanding of metabolism. So you're doing a phenomenal job. We're 2 in out of total of 5. And so keep on going, keep on sticking with me here, okay? Level 3 understanding of metabolism is what we call the TDEE understanding, the TD understanding. No, that's not how actually people say it, but I just thought I'd be silly there for a second. The TD understanding of metabolism, okay? Why? Because when some people talk about metabolism, they are referring to something called TDEE, okay? Now, you might be thinking, Coach Yasin, more acronyms? Yes, stick with me here, okay? You're not going to become a remote wellness practitioner if you don't actually have to learn, okay? Did you really think you were going to become an RWP if you never had to learn? Of course not, right? So don't worry. You get the hang of it. It's going to become easier and easier as we start to talk about this, okay? So let's go ahead and answer the $1 million question here. What is TD? What is TDEE, okay? TDEE is short for total daily energy expenditure, okay? Now you might say, wow, that sounds fancy. That sounds complicated. Nah, it's not really that fancy and it's not really that complicated, okay? TDEE is really just how much energy, aka calories, that your specific body burns total in a given day. Now, immediately you might ask, well, okay, how is that any different than BMR? Well, remember, BMR is how much energy it takes in order to keep you alive, remember? TDEE, on the other hand, is your BMR plus any other activity that you do, right? Because you're probably not just sitting in a coma for 24 hours straight. Hopefully. Hopefully not, right? I mean, you're listening to this training, so you're definitely not sitting in a coma all day long, right? And so TDEE is your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, which is how much energy it takes in order to keep you alive, plus any other activity that you do as well, okay? And so in other words, BMR plus activity equals TDEE. And remember, what is BMR again? BMR is basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories your body burns in a day to keep you alive. And so TDEE, which is total daily energy expenditure, equals basal metabolic rate, BMR, plus activity. And so visually, this is what it looks like. TDEE, you got BMR, and then you got activity, okay? Now, what you will notice from this visual is that you will notice that because BMR is one component of TDEE, and it's typically the biggest component, okay? It typically makes about 60 to 70% of the total energy that you burn in a specific day is going to be going towards basal metabolic rate in order to keep you alive, okay? So as a result, because BMR is just one component of TDEE, it's always going to be smaller than TDEE, right? So for example, many people have a BMR of around maybe 1,600 or 1,800 calories per day, right? And then their TDEE for those people might be around 2,200 or 2,600 calories per day, right? And so as a result, BMR will usually constitute about 70% of your TDEE, okay? And so this is what total daily energy expenditure. This is what level 3 understanding of metabolism is. And so when people use the word metabolism when they don't know what they're talking about, sometimes this is what they are referring to. They are referring to the amount of energy that it takes to keep you alive and the amount of energy that you use for activity. Okay. Now, as I said in the previous level, I know this is a new term. Okay, I know this is a new term, but remember, you don't have to have these memorized. They will become ingrained in your memory the more you use them. So do not get overwhelmed with new terms or new acronyms, okay? Just like everything else, with repetition, it will get easier. It is easy if you believe it is easy. Now, a couple other points about level 3 understanding of metabolism. First question, is everyone's TDEE, total daily energy expenditure, the same? And how do we calculate, okay? Now, because everyone's body is different and the amount of activity that everybody does is different, the total daily energy expenditure, TDEE, for each of us is also different. And so how do we calculate the amount of TDEE calories? How do we actually calculate the amount of calories and energy that we burn in a specific way? Well, there are many ways to do it, but the easiest way in today's world is online calculators, okay? There are literally hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands at this point, online calculators that estimate TDEE, okay? And they work very similarly to the BMR equations, because what they actually are doing is that these online calculators are taking the equations that we learned from level 2 understanding, and what they do is they multiply that BMR that is calculated by a specific multiplier based on how much activity that you do. Okay, so these online calculators will take your gender, your weight, your age, your height, and then they'll ask you, hey, how much activity do you do? So that way they'll determine what that multiplier for activity is. And then they'll ask you, hey, what BMR formula do you want to use, right? And so this is why those online calculators, if you've ever done this in the past, maybe you haven't, maybe you have, we're going to be doing this in the activity for this training. But this is why those online calculators ask, how much activity do you do, right? Now, a lot of times, a lot of people sometimes get lost in asking the question, hey, what's the best online calculator out there for estimating TDEE? But that's a complete waste of time because, like we talked about for BMR, there is no calculator, there is no equation that is going to be able to be accurate for all people under all circumstances, okay? But luckily for us, we don't have to have the calculators be 1,000% accurate in order to be useful for us, because all we need is when we are starting our journey of weight loss, when we're starting our journey of weight maintenance, of muscle gain, of fat maintenance or fat gain, whatever it might be, all we need is a starting point. And we always have to remember that all of these are just estimations, okay? And so all of these calculations and equations are just estimations. And the way that we actually calculate our actual TDEE is something that we're going to talk about later inside of this training. But I just want you to know that these calculators are used just as starting points, okay? And again, we're going to be inside of the activity of this training, calculating your estimated TDEE towards the end of this training. Now, as we close out level 3 understanding of metabolism, a couple other terms that I want you to be familiar with or at least know. TDEE, TEE, what is going on here? Well, sometimes some experts might refer to TDEE as total energy expenditure, right? TEE. And all they did was just drop the word daily from it, right? So these dang scientists, right? They like to keep us on our toes and they like to shake things up, right? So don't be confused, okay? TDEE and TEE are exactly the same thing, but for simplicity purposes, we are going to use the term TDEE inside of this program, okay? Now, why do you need to understand level 3 of metabolism? The reason is because, like we've already spoken about, level 3 metabolism is actually going to be what we utilize when we talk about level 4 and 5 here in just a second. And then on top of that, level 3 metabolism is what sometimes people refer to when they talk about metabolism. And what they're actually referring to is total daily energy expenditure, okay? This level, level 3, is the understanding of metabolism that is a lot of times most common when people talk about metabolism, or anybody who's really educated even a little bit about metabolism, they are typically talking at a level 3, okay? Now, remember, every level that we dive deeper into the 5 levels of understanding metabolism, this is going to get more and more scientific, and you will have a better and better understanding of what metabolism actually is. But overall, this is level 3 understanding of metabolism. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop into level 4 understanding of metabolism. So again, you're doing phenomenal. Stick with me here, okay? We've already gone ahead and talked about level 1, level 2, level 3. Look at you go. Your understanding of metabolism is getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And so now we're going to talk about level 4 understanding of metabolism. Now, level 4 understanding of metabolism is what is called TDEE with activity expanded, okay? Now, why? Is because when some people talk about metabolism, what they are actually talking about is TDEE with activity expanded, okay? Now, what does that mean with activity expanded? Like, I know what TDEE is, total daily energy expenditure, but what is this activity expanded portion on here, okay? So as we already learned in the previous level, TDEE is short for total daily energy expenditure. And it's basically just the amount of energy that you need to stay alive, BMR, plus the activity that you do in a day, right? We already talked about this in the previous level. But some people, when they talk at a level 4 understanding of metabolism, when some people are talking about metabolism, they take this part right here, the activity that you do in a day, right? This part of the TDEE equation. And what they do is they divide this up into 2 different types of activity. What are those 2 different types of activity? The first type of activity that they divided into is called physical activity. And the second one is what we coined as digestion activity. So they take the second part of TDEE, the activity that you do in a day, and they divide it into 2 parts, physical activity and digestion activity. Now, you might be thinking right now, digestion activity? What the heck? Coach Yasin, like I understand physical activity, but what the heck is this thing called digestion activity? So digestion activity, as it's more commonly known by its scientific name, is called the thermic effect of food, TEF, okay? Sounds complicated and it sounds fancy, but it's really not, okay? Digestion activity, or TEF, or thermic effect of food, is really just how much energy, how many calories your specific body uses in order to ingest and digest food. And so I want you to think about that for a second. Doesn't that make sense? Your body actually needs energy in order to break down energy, which is just food. And so all the energy, aka calories, that you need in order to digest, absorb, and process the nutrients in your meal, that is what is called the thermic effect of food, TEF, or digestion activity. Okay, now you might be thinking, but Coach Yasin, like digesting food, that can't take a lot of energy, can it? Actually, 10% of your daily energy expenditure goes towards the heat generated in the digestion process in order to break down the food, and more than just heat, but really all the energy that's required in order to break down the food. 10%. Wow, that's a lot. Yep. Digestion and breaking down food takes a lot of energy. 10%, approximately 10%, okay? Bottom line, the calories that you burn digesting food is what is referred to as the thermic effect of food, aka TEF, aka digestion activity. And so at a level 4 understanding of metabolism, this is what we are talking about. We are talking that TDEE, aka your metabolism, aka total daily energy expenditure, is made up of your BMR plus your physical activity plus your digestion activity, okay? So in other words, what we are talking about here is that total daily energy expenditure equals BMR plus physical activity plus TEF. What is BMR again? BMR is basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories that you burn in order to keep alive. And then what is TEF? TEF is the amount of calories that you burn in order to digest and break down food. And so TDEE at a level 4 understanding is BMR plus physical activity plus TEF. And so visually, this is what that looks like with the breakdown. TDEE, we have BMR in the blue, TEF in the orange, physical activity in the red. BMR in the blue, TEF in the orange, red is the physical activity, okay? And so this is what we talk about when we talk about a level 4 understanding of metabolism with TDEE and activity expanded. Activity expanded means we took activity and we divided into 2 types of activity. And so when people talk about metabolism, right? When some people talk about that term, this is sometimes, those who are more scientifically inclinated, this is sometimes the understanding level that they are talking about. Now, just like we talked about in all of the other levels, yes, I understand that TEF, thermic effect of food, TEF, I know it's a new term. But again, don't worry. With repetition, it's going to become ingrained and you will not have to memorize it. So just don't get overwhelmed with new terms or new acronyms or anything like that, okay? With repetition, you will get it. It is easy if you believe it is easy, okay? A couple other points I want to talk about when we talk about level 4 understanding of metabolism. The question that you might have is, do all foods take the same amount of energy to burn, right? In other words, do all foods have the same thermic effect of food, TEF, right? Now, you might remember in a previous training, we talked about how carbs have simple chemical structures, right? And do you remember that we said that protein and fats have more complex chemical structures? So if that's the case, wouldn't it make sense that because carbs are more simple, that they take less energy to break down? And wouldn't it make sense that because protein and fats are more complex, that they take more energy to break down, right? And so that's exactly how it works. In fact, protein causes the largest rise in the thermic effect of food. It causes the most amount of energy in order to actually break it down, okay? So what does that mean? Protein utilizes more energy to break down. So therefore, if you eat more protein, you will have a larger portion of TEF in your TDEE. I know, acronyms, crazy. And so if you eat more protein, you will have a larger percentage of the TEF making up your TDEE. Okay, so maybe at this point you're starting to see how all of these are layers and how all of them come together. Because if you just eat more protein and more fat in your diet, you will burn more calories. simply because of the fact that they take up more energy to burn and digest. How crazy is that? And so this is really how cool, as you start to understand metabolism more and more, and you understand, okay, so metabolism is the total daily energy expenditure that I have in a single day. It's made up of these different pieces. You can really start to see how it kind of puts together in different layers, and it starts to really become cool as you start to understand metabolism at different levels, okay? Now, the other question that you might have in regards to TEF is everyone's TEF the same, right? How do we actually calculate the thermic effect of food? So because everyone eats different amounts of macronutrients and everyone has different levels of activity, everyone's TDEE with activity expanded is also different, okay? So there is no equation or calculator to exactly calculate this. But as we talk about more advanced tactics here later on inside of this training, as well as in upcoming trainings, you're gonna actually learn how to more accurately determine what your TDEE is as a whole, including your TEF. And so to close out level 4 understanding of metabolism, the reason why it's important to understand the level 4 of metabolism is because as we get into the last level of understanding metabolism, level 5, it is going to build on this. Also, because when people who are a little bit more scientifically oriented, maybe some people who have heard about or researched metabolism in the past, when they talk about metabolism, this is what they are talking about. They are talking about dividing up between physical activity and TEF, okay? So everyone has this different definition of metabolism. Now you are equipped to be able to have that conversation at a level 4, okay? Also, this level of metabolism is one that many people don't speak about, but if you typically do speak to like a nutritionist or someone who's a medical professional, this is typically, if they're at least a good nutritionist or medical professional, they will be familiar with this understanding of metabolism. And you just want to keep in mind, right now we are almost to the end of understanding the 5 levels of metabolism. You can see how things are starting to become more and more scientific as your understanding of metabolism starts to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And so this is the level 4 understanding of the energy that you burn, aka metabolism. Now, I do want to just go ahead and check in on you. Is your brain on fire yet? Okay, now I know this training is longer than normal. I just need you to pay attention with me, okay? Because we're literally almost done. Like we're almost at the finish line, okay? Like I could have split up this training into like 10-minute trainings, okay? But then imagine in the future, if you ever wanted to reference this material when you actually put together your transformation program and you come back to this training and you refresh it, imagine having to scrub through 10 different trainings or open up 10 different guides. And that would be a pain, right? And so instead we have one long training, but that is the beauty of e-learning, is that you can get up, you can pause, you can take a break, you can do this at your own pace according to your own needs, okay? So just hang in there with me. I'm just checking in on you. You're doing a phenomenal job. And with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and hop into the 5th level of understanding metabolism. And this is the deepest and most scientific level of understanding metabolism, okay? It is at this level that once you understand it, you will be able to have a conversation with research scientists about metabolism. So yes, that does mean that there will be more terms at this level because we're getting to the highest level of understanding metabolism, right? But you're gonna get used to it, so strap in, you can do this, okay? Level 5 of understanding metabolism is what we call TDEE with physical activity expanded, okay? Why do we talk about it like that? Is because when some people talk about metabolism, this is what they are referring to. So what is that? What does that mean, TDEE with physical activity expanded? So as we already talked about, right? We already talked about this in the previous levels. TDEE stands for total daily energy expenditure, okay? And so we also learned that the thermic effect of food is a part of TDEE, right? It's basically how much energy your body uses to digest food, right? We already talked about this in the previous level. And we said that there's BMR, there's TEF, and then there's physical activity. So here's the thing. At level 5, when some people are talking about TDEE and metabolism, what they do is they zoom in on this physical activity portion right here. And they say, you know what, we're going to get even more specific, okay? And so some people, when they refer to physical activity, what they do is they divide it up into 2 different types of physical activity. They say there's non-exercise activity, and they say that there is exercise activity. Dang, okay. So Coach Yasin, what's the difference between non-exercise activity and exercise activity? Like, what the heck? Okay, so let's talk about that, right? Non-exercise activity refers to all of the activities that you would normally do as a normal part of your day, okay? So all of the non-exercise activity calories are those calories, aka energy, that you burn from all activities throughout the day, such as fidgeting, getting up and down from your chair, doing chores, walking around, etc., okay? And the fancy schmancy science jargon people, they refer to this non-exercise activity by its scientific name called non-exercise activity thermogenesis. NEAT, okay? That is what the fancy schmancy name for it is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, aka NEAT, okay? On the other hand, exercise activity, this one's pretty straightforward, is any activity that you do that is exercise specific, okay? So anything that you do outside of your normal day-to-day, right? Like going to the gym, going on a run, anything that you consider exercise activity, okay? And so any energy that you burn as a result of those types of activity is going to fall into this category. And just like how non-exercise activity had a fancy schmancy name, the fancy schmancy science jargon people refer to exercise activity as the exercise activity thermogenesis, aka EAT, okay? Also referred to sometimes as thermic effect of activity, aka T. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, what in the world? TEF, EAT, T, NEAT, what's next? Feet? Oh, wait. Dang it, Coach Yasin, what in the world is going on, okay? Why these dang scientists got to get so specific with all this stuff, okay? The reason is because there's actually a good reason. Because the more specific that you get in science, the more easy it is to actually measure and calculate, okay? Now, you might say, but Coach Yasin, I'm so overwhelmed with all these different terms. But remember, we said, no being overwhelmed is allowed, okay? You pinky promised me that. And yes, I know it's new terms, but like I said, right? Like especially at this level, level 5, typically no student is pretty much ever going to actually question you on this stuff, okay? You do not have to memorize all of these terms or what all of them stand for, okay? Nobody's going to be giving you an exam of any of this, okay? And then with repetition, if and when you use these terms often enough in the future, you will get better at it, okay? And so as a practitioner, it just helps to know more of the behind the scenes so that way you can truly understand metabolism at the highest and deepest level. And so when we talk about level 5 metabolism, this is what we are talking about right here. We say that there's TDEE, and it's made up of your BMR, plus your non-exercise activity, plus your exercise activity, plus your digestion activity. And so if we put all of the acronyms to this, we have TDEE equals BMR plus NEAT plus EAT plus TEF. That, ladies and gentlemen, is level 5 understanding of metabolism, okay? So just as a refresher, what is BMR again? BMR stands for basal metabolic rate. It's the amount of calories that your body burns in a day to keep you alive. TEF, thermic effect of food, the amount of calories your body burns to digest and break down food. NEAT is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the amount of calories that your body burns doing chores or normal part of your day activity. And then EAT, which is exercise activity thermogenesis, the amount of calories that your body burns doing exercise specific activity, okay? And so when we put all of it together, this is what we get. We get BMR in the blue, we get NEAT in the green, we get EAT in the red, and we get TEF in the orange. And so we got blue, green, red, and orange. And so this, ladies and gentlemen, this right here is the 5th level and level 5 understanding of metabolism. And so sometimes when some people refer to metabolism, especially scientists and nutritionists and those people who graduate from fancy schmancy certifications, and this is the only level that they've learned, this is typically what they are talking about. And so that's what I want to go ahead and really open your eyes to here for a second, is because remember what we talked about? Most people, most organizations jump to this 5th level of understanding metabolism. Do you see now why it's so important to understand metabolism at different levels, right? All of these other organizations literally teach you from level 0 and they go directly to level 5 with nothing in between, okay? And so isn't that insane that when we just talked about TEF and NEAT and T and EAT and all this kind of stuff, right? Literally imagine if you did not understand metabolism and you were at a level 0, imagine jumping to that level of understanding metabolism. That would put your brain on fire, right? And so unfortunately, that is the way that most people who go through other certifications learn about what metabolism is. And that is exactly what when they go and talk to their own students, go and say, oh, you don't know what metabolism is? Well, let me go ahead and tell you. Metabolism is made up of TDEE, it's made up of EAT, it's made up of NEAT, it's made up of EAT, it's made up of da-da-da-da-da-da. It's crazy, right? And so this is why no other institution, organization, degree, or certification other than the Remote Wellness Academy teaches these abstract concepts like metabolism in levels and as simple as the way that we do it. And the reason we do it is so that way you can be empowered as the student to be able to communicate with people at all different levels of understanding metabolism. Now, the other question that you might have about level 5 metabolism is level 5 metabolism really practical? Like, can we really actually calculate level 5 metabolism with all of the different variances and all of the different factors that go into it, right? Well, even though we say that total daily energy expenditure, TDEE, is made up of approximately 70% BMR, 30% activity, and 10% TEF, right? Even though we say that, the only true way to actually keep track of all these variables would be in like a laboratory setting, okay? And so the truth is that all of this is just an estimation based on many different factors like age, gender, height, free mass, fat mass, diet history, all that kind of stuff, okay? And so we typically just estimate that BMR can take up anywhere between 60 and 70% of TDEE. Activity could be anywhere between 20 and 30%, right? You can also divide that up between NEAT and EAT, right? And then on top of that, metabolic response of food, TEF, could make up around 10%, right? So is any of this really real world practical? Well, it's actually important to understand this theoretically. Why? Because although BMR tends to remain fairly constant, the other components of TDEE can actually vary quite a bit depending on your exercise, your routine, your diet, and your lifestyle, right? So for example, fidgeting can increase the metabolic rate by 25 to 50%, okay? Another example, eating a high protein diet can increase the thermic effect of food by several hundred calories per day. And then on top of that, adding just a few cardio workouts to your weekly routine can help you burn an additional 1,000 calories per week. And so although BMR is hard to influence directly, we can influence NEAT and EAT and TEF in different ways. And so once we actually understand metabolism at a level 5, we can understand each of the components very specifically that make up the metabolism, aka TDEE. And this allows us to be able to manipulate these different factors in even a theoretical context to be able to increase and decrease our metabolism, aka our TDEE. Okay? And so at the end of the day, you might ask the question, well, hey, why do I need to understand level 5 of metabolism? Well, the reason you need to understand level 5 of metabolism is because, as you can see, number one, it's the highest level of understanding, it's the most scientific, and it also takes into consideration as many factors as possible when we talk about energy expenditure. And so typically when you're talking to a nutritionist or a medical professional, this is the level that they are talking about with specificity. Okay, and so this is ultimately the 5th and highest level of understanding metabolism, which is TDEE with physical activity expanded. Now, with all that being said, I want to go ahead and combine all 5 levels of understanding metabolism together and really summarize level 5 understanding of metabolism. Okay, so I really want you to give yourself a pat on the back because look at how far you've come in your understanding of metabolism inside of this training alone, right? You started off as level 1, thinking that, oh, metabolism is like a fire. And then now you've gone ahead and understood all of the factors that make up metabolism, right? You really understand, wow, level 5 understanding of metabolism is TDEE made up of BMR, made up of NEAT, of EAT, and of TEF. Wow, right? And so by understanding all 5 levels of metabolism, you are now fully equipped to have a conversation with anyone about metabolism, whether that be a beginner, a child, or even a research scientist. And so when most of society, when most other people are talking about metabolism and they have no idea what it is that they're talking about, right? What you realize that, you know what? Most of the people are really talking about similar things just at different levels, okay? So for most people who are at level 0 understanding, they walk around their entire life thinking about the metabolism boogeyman, and they think it's this abstract, vague concept that they've never heard about. And then all the other people in the world who go through degrees and certifications, who end up just information overloading onto their students, right? And they do a wrong disservice in understanding metabolism. Now, with your new understanding of all 5 levels of metabolism, what you can do, compared to those who are at level 0, those who have the metabolism boogeyman, or for those who do information overload. Instead, what you can do is you can speak and understand metabolism at all the levels. And so what you are doing is you are unlocking the full potential of harnessing the importance of health and this importance of metabolism in your health, okay? Do you now see how valuable this training was? It really opened your eyes, and now for the rest of your life, everybody that you talk to about this concept, to every single level of metabolism, whether that be at a beginner level or at a literal scientist research level of metabolism as well. Now, at this point, some students might get to the end of level 5 and say, Coach, man, I am overwhelmed. So what I want to do is I want to urge you, I want you to take a deep breath, okay? Because we did talk a lot about some deeper, higher level concepts. But did you really think that you were going to become a remote wellness practitioner, an RWP, and all you were going to think about metabolism was that it was like a fire? Of course not, right? Did you really think that you were going to become a master practitioner of the domain of health by just having a surface level 1 understanding of metabolism? I don't think so, right? And so I am going to hold you to a higher standard. I'm going to help you push past your upper thermostat of learning, of saying, hey, I'm overwhelmed, and hold you to a higher standard and say, hey, you can do this. I do believe in you. Okay, you do got this, okay? And so yes, there was a lot of content, but that is what is required in order for you to become a world-class practitioner, okay? Now, the other question that you might ask is, will my students ever really ask me about all of these levels, okay? What are the chances that a student is going to actually quiz me in all of these levels? Pretty much never, okay? But it is important for you as a practitioner to be familiar with. It's important to have it as a reference. And so now, if you want to be more scientific in your speaking of metabolism, you can talk at level 4 or level 5. If you want to be more basic, you can talk at level 1 or level 2. And if you want to be more in between, you can talk at level 3, right? And so that is ultimately the power of this training and your understanding of metabolism now, okay? The other question that you might have about level 5 metabolism: hey, coach, what about calculating my actual BMR? What about calculating my actual TDEE? What about calculating my actual metabolic burn rate? Okay, now, as I did mention, we will be talking about this more in an upcoming training. But as a note, I just want to quickly mention here, the only actual way to calculate BMR and TDEE and metabolic burn rate and all these kinds of things, after you've gone ahead and gotten the estimations from the equations and the calculators, is to pretty much eat the same amount of calories daily, okay, using what it is that you are going to learn in the next training called How Much to Eat. And then you weigh yourself every single morning on an empty stomach at around the same time. You do that for a few weeks in a row, and then you can see if your weight goes up or down, okay? This is the only actual scientific way to determine as close as possible what your actual metabolic rate is, other than like going to a lab or something like that, okay? And so if you use the calculator to determine that your starting TDEE is about 2,000 calories, and then you eat exactly 2,000 calories a day over the course of a week, and if your body weight average goes down by about 1 pound, then you know that your actual TDEE, as close as possible, was around 2,500 calories in order to maintain your weight. Why? And how did we do that? And how do we do some basic math to calculate that? Because we know that a pound of fat is 3,500 calories, aka units of energy. And so if you ate 500 calories less than your TDEE over the course of 7 days, that would mean that you had the 3,500 calories for that pound of fat that you lost. And so visually, this is what it would look like. On day number 1, you ate 2,000 calories, okay? But your body burned 2,500 calories. And so your daily caloric deficit was 500. And so throughout the week, 500, that caloric deficit added to 1,000 calories now, 1,500 because you're eating 2,000 calories a day, burning 2,500 calories a day. You're in a 500 calorie deficit. So you're 2,000, negative 2,500, negative 3,000. And then on day 7, you're on negative 3,500 caloric deficit. And so what that would mean, if we did some reverse engineering math on here, it would mean that if you lost after 7 days 1 pound of fat, it means that on average, you were eating about approximately 500 calories under your maintenance, and that is how you got there. So that's how we can determine that your maintenance was 2,500 calories. Now, again, remember, I know we're talking about this on a daily perspective. However, in actuality, it works more of like on a weekly and monthly perspective, but I'm just giving you just this as an example, okay? Now, if what I just said does not make any sense to you, and you're like brain blown, mind blown, I have no idea what he just said, don't worry. We'll talk about it in more detail in an upcoming training, but I just wanted to go ahead and plant the seed and really just mention it over here. Now, with that being said, as we get into the last section of this training, okay, now I know we talked about a lot of things inside of this training. This training was like a doozy on steroids, okay? What I do want to go ahead and say is I want to go ahead and do a pulse check. How are you doing so far? Because we're literally about to get to the very end and the last section of this training, but this is an awesome section for you to go ahead and take a pause. If you need to take a break, if you need to continue later, this is an awesome section for you to do that, okay? So remember, if you do need to break this training up, there is no rush. I am going to do a better job inside of these trainings of letting you know good parts for you to be able to take a break. And so if you need to just kind of pause for a second, you need to sit back, look away from the computer for a second, you need to stand up and move around, this is a phenomenal place to do that as we get into the last section of this training. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and now talk about the smart body metabolic adaptation. What the heck is this fancy schmancy term, Coach Yasin? Well, remember how we talked about how your actual metabolism rate, the actual number of calories that you use every single day, it's going to be different for every person, right? We said it's based on a lot of different factors, right? One of those factors is how adapted their metabolism is. Okay, well, what the heck does that mean? Well, what we're going to do inside of this section, the last section of this training, is we're going to look at something called metabolic adaptation, okay? Because right now, you might be thinking, wow, Coach Yasin, okay, so I'm starting to get a hang of this entire process, right? This entire weight loss, weight gain, muscle gain process on here, okay? So what you're basically saying is that it's all just science. It's input in, input out. And so all I got to do is I just got to eat less than I burn and I'm going to lose weight. So great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate my maintenance BMR, right? Based on what I learned inside of this training. And then I'm just going to use what I learned inside of the next training, which is how much to eat. And I'm just going to make sure that I eat less than I actually burn. It's as simple as that. In fact, Coach Yasin, now that I know that a pound of fat is 3,500 calories and I know that my TDEE is 2,000 calories, then you know what I can do, Coach? I can literally just eat 1,000 calories a day and I can lose fat even faster, right? And so that's what I'm going to do, Coach. I'm literally going to starve myself and I'm literally going to eat 1,000 calories a day, even though my TDEE is 2,000, okay? And I know I can do that because I can muscle my way through it. I can white knuckle my way through it. And I'm going to just go ahead and go into an extreme caloric deficit. I'm just going to eat so much less than I need because then I'll be able to burn 3,500 calories so much faster, okay? So easy peasy. So if I want to lose 10 pounds, I'm just going to go ahead and eat 1,000 calories for 35 days. And then before you know it, I'm going to have lost 10 pounds. Okay. That's all I got to do. It's as easy as that, Coach. I literally got my head around it. It's simple math. Unfortunately not. Hang on there for a second, right? Because your body is actually smarter than that. What I want to show you right now is what if I showed you that for every single day that you were in a caloric deficit, your body was actually burning less and less and less and less every single day that you put yourself into a caloric deficit. And so what that would mean is that over time, you would actually find it more difficult to burn fat because now your body's burning less and less calories. Yep, let me show you exactly how this kind of gets a little bit sticky. And so this is why I want to talk to you about metabolic adaptation explained, okay? So as you've learned so far, there are a lot of diets out there, okay? But there's only one way to lose weight. There's only one way, period, okay? Regardless of what diet it is, there's only one way to ever lose weight. And the only way to ever lose weight or lose fat is to eat less calories than you burn every single day, right? So we talked about this already. I'm not even going to go into it too much over here, right? There's energy that you eat and there's energy that you burn, okay? And so that way you can either eat less than you burn or you can burn more than you eat. Regardless, it's going to create a caloric deficit. That's it, okay? So put simply, you want to put your body into a caloric deficit. That is the only way to lose weight, as we have already learned. And remember, don't fall into the trap to thinking this is only about losing fat. No. We are not talking about fat loss here. This also applies to gaining weight. This also applies to muscle mass. It also applies to maintaining weight, maintaining fat, all of that kind of stuff, just with different calories. Easy, right? Hold on. This is where I said it gets a little bit sticky, okay? Because our genes and our hormones inside of us that control our eating behavior were actually shaped at a time when food was scarce. And so our bodies have adapted to, if I eat less than I burn, then it must mean that there's a lack of resources, aka food. And so if you eat fewer calories than your metabolism requires, then your body immediately and instantly perceives danger, okay? But then wait a second. Coach, didn't you just tell me that I have to eat fewer calories than my metabolism in order for me to lose fat? But now you're telling me that if I eat less than I burn, my body's going to think that I'm in danger? What are you talking about? Yep, that's literally what we are talking about, okay? So literally, being in a caloric deficit, which is what we talked about is the only way to actually lose fat, causes your brain to put on the alarm system. Why? Because, and here's a surprising fact, because your body actually wants you to be fat. My body wants me to be fat? What the heck? What are you saying, Coach? Coach Yasin, what are you saying? You're saying my body wants me to be fat? Yup. Because remember, everything that we've learned about the body and the limbic system so far, right? The limbic system and the body, it loves the path of least resistance. It's all about survival. It's all about keeping you protected, okay? And so if you put yourself, if it's even possible, you put yourself in the shoes of your body, right? If you are fat, what does that mean for your body? If you are fat, it means that you're ready for the next famine, baby. Heck yeah. Right? And so the body actually wants you to be fat. It actually wants to hold on to fat because in the case of starvation times, which was actually very, very, very common back in the day, you will actually be more prepared. And so when you eat less than your body needs in order to maintain, the body says, we have less calories than we need. We're going to have to start burning some of this precious fat reserves that we've been building up for so long, these energy reserves, right? We don't want to do that. We want to do that as a last option, right? So we got to go ahead and sound the alarm bells. We're going to go into starvation mode. We're going to go ahead and give all these urges and all these cravings, okay? And so if you think about that for a second, you might be 200 pounds, or you might know somebody, or in general, someone might be 200 pounds overweight. They might have 200 pounds of stored fat, stored energy on their body. And yet, their body would still think that they are going to starve because it has to start using some of that fat up. Think about how crazy that is for a second. When the body thinks that there are less resources in the environment, aka like a famine, right? Because you are cutting calories, the body is going to start to make changes within itself, okay? The body is going to start to turn the alarm bells on and it's going to start making changes within itself automatically. Imagine how smart your body is, right? This is amazing, right? What is it going to do? Your body, once you're in a caloric deficit, is actually going to, slow down your metabolism. And so your metabolism, aka what we have learned from a level 5 understanding, TDEE, is literally going to decrease as you lose weight. Dude, this is crazy. It's crazy, okay? And since you now understand all levels of metabolism, I'm going to go ahead and use level 5 understanding of metabolism to really explain to you how crazy this actually is, okay? So at a level 5 understanding of metabolism, when you are in a caloric deficit, your body will actually slow down your BMR and it'll slow down your body's basic functions because of the fact that it is in a caloric deficit, okay? Your body will literally slow down on the NEAT, the non-exercise activity, and you will not feel like you want to do your laundry, you won't feel like you want to do as much chores or movement and that kind of stuff if you're in a caloric deficit. In fact, this is how crazy this is. This is literally how crazy this is. Studies have shown that people who are in a caloric deficit actually blink less frequently. Your body automatically adjusts the rate at which it blinks simply because of the fact that it knows that it's in a caloric deficit. And so it's using everything it can in order to conserve energy. How crazy is that? That's insane, right? As well as your exercise activity, right? Your workouts, when you're in a caloric deficit, they're not going to be as intense. You're not going to feel like you can push yourself as much. That is because your body is trying to hold back because you're in a caloric deficit. And then on top of that, also with the digestion activity, with the TEF that we talked about, right? Your body's going to crave more simple foods, aka carbs, because they take less energy in order to break down. And then on top of that, if all of this wasn't crazy or wild enough, additionally, your body is going to be more likely to go limbic and give more power to the limbic self in order to fight off survival when it is inside of a caloric deficit. And so all of a sudden, you will find yourself going limbic a lot more. You'll find it more difficult to be conscious because of the fact that the limbic self has more power, because of the fact that the body is saying, hey, we are in survival mode. And so therefore it's harder for us. And so that's why we need to go ahead and give more power to the limbic self. And so this is all of what's happening when your body is going into emergency survival mode. This is what's happening when you are going into a caloric deficit, which, remember, is the only actual way in order to lose fat on your body, right? There is no other way. And so it's no wonder that losing fat is so difficult, right? It's just as much of a mental game as it is a physical game. And so this is the reason why so many people break their quote unquote diets, aka their caloric deficit, and are unable to stick with it because it's not easy, right? And so this entire process of your metabolism slowing down in order to adjust for you being in a caloric deficit, this is what is known as metabolic adaptation, also known sometimes in a more scientific context as adaptive thermogenesis, okay? And now I want you to know, I know all of what I just said sounds crazy and it sounds abnormal and all this kind of stuff. What I want you to know is that metabolic adaptation is completely normal. And the reason why weight loss is not linear and sometimes even stalls or plateaus at certain points is because of this thing called metabolic adaptation. And so this is where some students, after learning this, they might say, okay, well, now that I know that being in a caloric deficit for a long period of time, it's tough, it's not easy, the mindset is very difficult to do. Well, you know what I'm going to do, coach? I'm going to go ahead and put my body into a severe caloric deficit, like super big time, and I'm going to just get this fat loss over with quicker because I know that there are 3,500 units of energy, aka calories, in a pound of fat. And so the more calories that I can burn every single day by lowering the amount of calories that I eat, the faster I'm going to burn fat, right? And instead of eating 2,000 calories when my maintenance is 2,500 and only putting myself in a 500 calorie deficit, so I lose a pound of fat over the course of a week, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to eat like 500 calories a day when my maintenance is 2,500. And then as a result, I'm going to have a 2,000 calorie deficit every single day. And then over the course of an entire week, I'm going to burn 14,000 calories. And so therefore, I'm going to burn 4 pounds of fat. And that's going to be burning fat at 4 times the rate if I did a smaller deficit. Now, this is, of course, if you actually wanted to burn fat and you actually wanted to lose weight if you focus on the calories eaten. There's other techniques when we talk about movement and we talk about actually calories burned and how you can actually increase the amount of fat that you lose by increasing the amount of activity that you do. But the question is, why don't you just do this? Why not just eat 500 calories, right? And your maintenance is 2,500 and you lose 4 pounds in a week, right? Why not do that? The reason why you don't want to do that is because you might turn into a Prius. Yes, I said that correct. You might turn into a Prius. What? Coach Yasin, I'm going to turn into a Prius, like a Toyota Prius? What are you talking about here, right? Hear me out for a second. Over time, the longer that you are in a caloric deficit, the more efficient your body becomes at using less calories in order to maintain your body weight, okay? And so you can put your body into too much of a caloric deficit. And when you do that, that's when you end up becoming a Prius, okay? And so if you think about the way a Prius operates, it uses very little fuel in order to go very far. I mean, it has like 54 miles per gallon city, 50 miles per gallon highway, right? And so oftentimes when people try to lose weight or control their weight with any kind of like strict, severe calorie cutting, or, they eat way too little, not only does that end up killing your metabolism, what it actually ends up doing, right, is when you eat too little for far too long, your body doesn't like that. And because your body is very smart and it's very intuitive, okay, if your body notices that you're getting way too less fuel, what it's going to do is going to start to decide what functions are most important and where the fuel goes. And so if your metabolism is a Prius, what it means is that it takes forever for you to burn off the calories because the body has gotten very efficient at using that fuel. And so as a result, you are extremely efficient at maintaining your body's homeostasis, okay? And so in some cases, such as survival, this would be amazing, right? Being a Prius in hunter and gatherer days back in the day, this would be like a superpower because basically your body would be amazing at burning fuel very slowly and storing the rest of it for later, right? And so if your metabolism was like a Prius back in hunter and gatherer days, you'd be doing great. But in today's world, where there's so much food everywhere, there's literally unlimited amounts of food, you don't want to be like a Prius, right? You don't want to be efficient at burning food slowly because you want to go out and enjoy that new pizza place, and then you want to come home for lunch and you eat with the family, and then at dinner you want to go try out that new burger place, all in one day. And so in today's world, because there is no shortage of food, you don't want to be a Prius in the modern times, okay? So then the question is, if you don't want to be a Prius, well, what do you want your body and metabolism to be like instead? Well, instead of being a Prius, you want to be like my friend over here, the Hummer. Okay, the Hummer gets 10 miles to the gallon city and 13 miles to the gallon in the highway. And so a Hummer gets terrible gas mileage. It's terrible at how efficient it is when it uses fuel. It burns fuel fast and it's more inefficient and it's less adaptive, and the metabolism takes forever in order to burn off all of those calories. But what that means is that it's easier to burn the fat more quickly. And so in the modern world, this is what we want our bodies to do with the food. Why? Because when we eat a lot of food, right, we get to enjoy restaurants and snacks and that kind of stuff. And we get to do all of that without gaining a lot of weight, okay? And so this is what your body wants to do. It wants to become efficient, especially useful in hunter and gatherer times, right? But what you want in modern times is you want to be more like a Hummer. Okay. And so this is what happens with metabolic adaptation, is that when people cut their calories too low for too long, or they have been doing yo-yo dieting for a very long period of time, they end up turning into a Prius. But the good news is that you can absolutely change from being a Prius into becoming a Hummer by systematically changing how much energy that your body eats over a period of time. And how you do that is by really fueling your body with the proper nutrition and having muscle growth. And you start to increase the amount of calories that you are eating over a period of time. So that way your body learns to adapt to this higher level of fuel while staying at the same body fat percentage. And then also, if you can increase the amount of muscle that is on your body, this entire process happens so much faster. And then boom, Hummer status is unlocked, okay? Now, I know I did not go into much detail exactly how you become a Hummer inside of this section right here. So if you're confused, don't worry. We're going to be going over it more in upcoming trainings, but I did just want to go ahead and touch on this very important topic, okay? So the bottom line of metabolic adaptation is this. Your metabolism, aka your TDEE, decreases as you lose weight because your body is actually prioritizing other functions in the body, and creating a large caloric deficit in attempts to lose weight can actually backfire on you, okay? Because our bodies are smart and programmed for survival. Severely limiting calories can make your body think it's entering into a famine, and it actually needs fewer calories. And so your body adapts to the restricted caloric intake and uses fewer calories to perform those same tasks, aka becomes like a Prius. And so this entire process is normal when you're not doing it in an extreme way. And so metabolic adaptation does not cause any permanent damage to your metabolism, okay? And people who have lost weight do not have compromised metabolisms relative to their new bodies. This is true even if they have lost a lot of weight and they lose it fast, okay? Assuming that no muscle is lost, okay? The best way to minimize and mitigate the effects of metabolic adaptation is to be active, strength train, and eat a diet that retains muscle, aka high protein, which again, we're going to be covering more in upcoming trainings. And the metabolic adaptation can subtly make further weight loss seem more difficult, but never makes it impossible. And so therefore, there isn't ever any permanent damage to the metabolism, okay? So starvation mode, as some people talk about it, is not real. You can't be plateaued or gain weight simply because you are eating too little. It is not a thing. So that is metabolic adaptation. Beautiful. Now, as we start to close out this training, I am going to go over a couple metabolism myths that are going to be busted. Now, I'm not going to go into detail with these. I'm just going to read you the headers. These will be inside of the guide available for you if you would like to have more reference. A myth, eating late at night slows down your metabolism. The explanation of why that is not true is inside of the guide. A diet of green tea and chili peppers will boost my metabolism. I can't tell you how many crazy myths there are about metabolism. So many. The answer to why that is not true is inside of the guide as well. Our metabolic rates can't change throughout our lives. Not true. The answer is inside of the guide. I am overweight, so I must have a slow metabolism. Not true. Answer is inside of the guide for that as well. Myth, very low calorie diets and skipping meals can jumpstart weight loss. Myth. Answer for that is inside of the guide. Eating breakfast jumpstarts your metabolism. Myth. The answer for that is also inside of the guide. Myth, eating smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day increases your metabolic rate. Myth. The answer for why that is not true is also inside of the guide. Also, the bottom line is there for all of the myths regarding metabolism as well. Beautiful. Now, as we start to close out this training here, I want to go ahead and talk to you about metabolism, how much you burn, the activity for this. So inside of this activity, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and put to practice everything that we've learned about metabolism by calculating your estimated metabolism. Okay. Now, remember, all of this is further going to come together when we talk about the upcoming training, connecting nutrition and movement. But I do want to just go ahead and plant the seeds there so you can start to get your feet wet with all of this, okay? And so in upcoming trainings, we're going to be talking about, well, hey, do I need to burn more or do I need to eat less? Like, what part of this equation do I actually need to adjust? And what is the ways that I can actually do that, okay? So for now, just do this activity so you can lay the foundations, and then over time, it will become more and more and more clear in upcoming trainings, okay? So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and cut over to the quick mini training that is going to be talking about calculating your estimated metabolism and the activity for that now. All right, welcome to this quick mini training about calculating your estimated metabolism and the activity associated with it. So just as a reminder, really quickly, as always, for all of the activities and worksheets and templates and swipe files that we give you inside of the program, make sure that when you open up this document, you click on File, make a copy, and then save it inside of your Google Drive. And so what we're going to do with this activity is that this activity is going to help you practice calculating your metabolism at each of the different levels of understanding of what metabolism is, okay? So just remember that when some people refer to BMR, when some people refer to TDEE, a lot of them may not know what they're talking about, or they might know what they're talking about, but they're being vague in how they're talking about it. And so they might refer to that as metabolism. And so all of that just depends on what level of understanding and for what purpose the person is talking about metabolism, okay? Now, it's important to mention here, don't forget that no matter what equation or calculator or whatever we use, every time that we calculate BMR or TDEE or anything like that, it's always just an estimation in the beginning, okay? And so you and your student is a unique individual, and that's why it's so important when we talk about week-to-week changes in upcoming trainings, when we talk about muscle gain or we talk about fat loss or anything like that. It's very important to understand exactly that it is just an estimation, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about the actual activity and the instructions for the activity. So this activity is going to be broken down into two parts. There's going to be part one, which is going to be where you go ahead and calculate your estimated maintenance calories. And then there is going to be a part two. And in part two, you're going to calculate your estimated goal calories, okay? And then for both of those parts, you're going to be filling in the worksheet that is on page number 3 of the actual activity, okay? So you see here part 1, and then you have part 2. So let's go ahead and talk about the instructions for part number 1 first. So for part number 1, you are going to go ahead and calculate your estimated maintenance calories with 3 different methods, okay? So the very first method is going to be the manual method. Then you're going to calculate the BMR using an online calculator, and then you're going to calculate your TDEE using an online calculator as well, okay? So for the manual method, what you're going to do is you are going to be using the manual method multipliers that are located here, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to take your body weight right now, and you are going to multiply your body weight by a multiplier inside of the maintenance range. Because remember, what we are doing for the maintenance calories is we're just figuring out, okay, how many calories of energy do I need to eat just to maintain my weight? And so typically, smack dab here in the middle is 14. And so you're typically going to multiply your body weight by 14. And then what you're going to do is once you find out what that number is, you are then going to go ahead and put that in the worksheet that I showed you down below. Okay, so that is your maintenance calories using the manual method. Then you're going to go ahead and for the second part of part number 1, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and calculate your BMR using an online calculator, and you are going to use the one that we go ahead and link inside of the activity. Now, keep in mind, there's nothing special about this one. This is literally just one that we Googled and we liked the format of it, and so we went ahead and used it. There's literally hundreds and thousands of them out there, so don't get too caught up in this specific one. And the equation, like we learned in the main training, the equation that we're going to use is going to be the Mifflin equation, okay? And then we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing for TDEE as well. So let me go ahead and open that up and show you what it is that we are talking about. So once you open this up, and mind all the ads or whatever this company and this website wants to shoot at us, but we're really just here for the TDEE calculator, okay? So let's say, for example, you come here and you are a female, and let's say you weigh 140 pounds, and let's say your height is, I don't know, let's just say you're like 5'3", and let's say you're 30 years old, okay? And then you're gonna go ahead and put in your activity here. And so there's different levels of activity, or you could do a custom activity multiplier as well. But typically, let's say you're, kind of sedentary, just like that. And then right here, you have your BMR formula, which you're going to select, which we're going to be using the Mifflin one. And so once you do that, you're going to see that your stats based off of the activity that you put into the calculator, that your TDEE, your total daily energy expenditure, is approximately estimated to be this much. And your BMR, remember we learned about this when we talked about the different levels of metabolism, is going to be this much, okay? So now we have our TDEE and we have our BMR, okay? And so now if you go back to the activity on here, that's all we got to do is we got to take those two numbers, and those two numbers go ahead and give us the answer for 2 and 3. So all we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take those numbers, and we're going to put them inside of the worksheet activity right over here, okay? So boom, boom, just like that is what we're going to do by taking these numbers right here. So BMR and TDEE, we're going to take those two numbers and we are going to put them into the worksheet. Boom, right there. That is part number 1. Now, for part number 2, what we're going to do is step 1, we're going to determine what our goal weight is. What do we actually want to get to, whether that be lose weight, gain weight, whatever, remember. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to determine how many pounds that we want to lose or gain per week. Now, as a general approximation, typically 1 pound, typically like 1.5 pounds. That's typically what somebody who's of average body weight would lose per week, 1 to 1.5 pounds. And then gain per week is going to be smaller than that, probably like 0.5 pound per week. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate our estimated goal calories using 2 methods, using the manual method and using the online calculator. So let me walk you through the manual method first. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our body weight, okay, and we're going to, our current body weight, let me emphasize that, our current body weight, and we're going to multiply that by one of the factors here, okay? So if we're going to go ahead and gain weight, we're going to multiply 16, 17, 18. If we want to do extreme weight gain, then it's going to be one of these other ones, okay? So typically you do want to stick to here. And then for weight loss, 10, 11, or 12, or extreme weight loss, 7, 8, or 9, okay? Typically you do want to kind of stay more on the balanced approach there because we want to make sure that we avoid metabolic adaptation and too severe calorie cutting. And so then when we have that number, what we're going to go ahead and do is we are going to go ahead and put that right over here. Okay, so manual method, goal calories per day, right there. Okay, and so also part 2, what is our goal weight? We're going to go ahead and put that there. And then how many pounds we want to gain or lose per week, we put that right there. Beautiful. Now, the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and use the online calculator to determine the estimated goal calories that we need to have, okay? And so we're going to go ahead, and if you still have it open in another tab, you can do that as well. And so if you just have your normal on here, right, the normal example that we said, let's say you're a female, 140 pounds, 5'3", 30, this is your activity, this is the BMR formula. Then if you scroll down, it'll show you how many calories that you need to eat per day in order to lose weight and how many to eat in order to gain weight, okay? And so let's say, for example, you wanted to lose about 1 pound per week, then that would be 1,225 calories for this person. If you wanted to be a little bit more severe, 725 calories if you wanted to lose 2 pounds per week, and the same thing for gaining weight as well, okay? So you're gonna go ahead and do that using the online calculator, and then inside of the worksheet down below, you're going to take whatever number that was for the number of calories per day for your goal, and you're gonna go ahead and put that on there, okay? So this is gonna be very important for you to do properly in order with the worksheet, so that way you are able to do the engagement post for this activity and let us know if you have any questions about this whatsoever. One last point I will mention for those of you who are looking to gain muscle or put on weight or anything like that, the reason you want to avoid being in a very large caloric surplus very, very quickly is because most of the time when you're in a very large caloric surplus, yes, even if you are working out like a massive amount and you're trying to put on a lot of muscle, most of the time those extra calories just end up getting stored as fat because the body can only produce and create and put together so much muscle at a time. And typically that's like 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month, depending on how novice or advanced the lifter actually is. And so typically avoiding things like extreme weight gain, because that's just going to cause a lot more fat gain. If you're not trying to gain a lot of fat, you're trying to gain more muscle, you want to stay away from this. And then same thing here with extreme fat loss or extreme weight loss, then same thing there, you're going to have a lot more metabolic adaptation. And so as a result, it's going to be harder for you to lose weight in the long term. So again, if what I just said did not make any sense to you, don't worry. We will be diving more into it in upcoming trainings. You will get more well-versed in all of this. But regardless, this was the calculating your estimated metabolism activity. Make sure you do it properly. Let us know if you have any questions. And with that being said, we're going to hop back over to the main training. All right, welcome back from that activity that was talking about calculating your estimated metabolism. It's going to be absolutely critical for you to do that because if you don't do that, you will be unable to engage inside of the student community. So what I want to do next is I want to talk to you about that exact engagement question. So what I want to go ahead and hear from you inside of the student community for the post for this specific training is I would love to know, what are your thoughts on this training about how much to burn, right? What did you learn about metabolism? What are the aha moments that you had from this training? And where do you see yourself applying what it is that you learned from this training? Okay, now again, inside of the engagement post, I don't need you to tell me that this was a long training, okay? I know it was a long training. We already talked about why these trainings are long. I don't need you to let me know that. What I want to know is what you got out of this training, okay? Now, I also want to go ahead and remind you is don't provide lazy answers, okay? Because your engagement inside of the comments of these trainings is really used to determine your participation for your certification when you get to module 6. What we're going to do as coaching staff is we're going to go through all of your engagement inside of the program, whether you did the activities, whether you actually submitted everything properly. We're going to go through everything to see whether you actually participated in this program to see if you're eligible for the certification. So don't be lazy with this. Like really, really talk to us. We love getting your feedback. We really do read all of the comments, okay? And so we love to hear from you. The other students love to hear from you. And to really give it a thoughtful response. What is it that you learned from this training? And where do you see yourself applying what it is that you learned from this training? And then finally, the last thing I want to go ahead and talk to you about is your action steps for this specific training. And so the action steps for this training are going to be number 1, obviously watch this training in full. Make sure you study it, okay? Make sure you do this in full. Then action step number 2, you're going to go ahead and complete the engagement question for this training, which is the above one that we just spoke about right now, okay? Action step number 3 is you are going to go ahead and complete the estimating your metabolism and calculating your estimated metabolism activity, the one that we spoke about earlier. And then after you complete that activity, you're going to comment on the post that is specific for that activity. And inside of this specific comment, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and let us know, okay? Specifically in this order, you're going to number them. You're going to let us know, number 1, what was your maintenance calories using the manual method? What was your BMR using the online calculator? What was your TDEE using the online calculator? What is your goal, lose weight, gain weight, or maintain? What is your goal calories using the manual method? And then what is your goal calories per day using the online calculator? And then finally, number 7, what are your thoughts after completing this activity? Okay, so this section, this engagement question is going to be a little bit longer, and you are going to want to use the enter key on your keyboard to number them. So you put number 1, your answer, hit shift enter, and then go ahead and put all of that in one comment. Don't make multiple comments, make one comment, shift enter on your keyboard to start another line, so that way you can separate all of the answers to each of these questions. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the training on how much to burn. It has been an absolute honor. This has been one of the most transformational trainings that I'm sure you have ever gone through in regards to metabolism. And with that being said, get your action steps done, and I will catch you on the next training.